I'm a second-year MFE student from right outside of Hartford, Connecticut. Did my undergrad at Bucknell, double majored in economics and mathematics. This summer, as Professor Zora mentioned, I completed an internship with a chemical company on their commodities production team, doing AI and data science, implementing some solutions there. As well, I've worked on 3 projects with our industry sponsors. Worked a little bit in the blockchain space, a little bit in the factor investing using machine learning, and then now recently also with one of the authors that the program is working with, again on an interpreting machine learning trading strategies project. So a little bit of my background, and so I guess we'll start with 2 housekeeping things that are very important. These are 2 things that if you have not done them, you are now late. The first one is coding. If you have not written a line of code, if you have just merely completed some data camps, that is not going to cut it. I know Michael Nelson's on the call, some other year in. Just a data camp is not going to cut it. What you're going to really need to do is you're going to need to go into the deep end of a project and start coding. Otherwise, that's really not going to work. People interviewing you are not dumb people. They're very smart. And they will know when you're cutting corners if you don't know something, and they will find out. So I would get your hands on a project that involves coding today, tomorrow, very soon. The second point about being late is with resumes and applying to jobs. If you want to be an investment banker, that boat has already sailed for you. Those applications happen in July for the bulge brackets, the middle markets, most of the boutiques. And so to that point, resumes and job apps need to go in like ASAP. If not, networking. I guess the goal for everyone is to be scheduling at least a call a week with someone. That call is not to ask them for a job. It's to understand if you're a good fit for a job. Specifically, you have no clue what these people most likely do. You don't know what their firm is like. Obviously, there's exceptions, but for the most part, you don't know. You're not there to convince them that you are the right person for the job. You are there to learn about the job. So that's how I would address networking. Obviously, please reach out to myself. I'm happy to. I have done it in the past. I'm happy to do it. Professor Zorro, some of the folks who you'll hear from later, when it comes to any kind of networking suggestions, resume suggestions, etc. Reach out. Do not be silent. That is the worst thing you can do, is just not say anything and just show up and kind of ride along. What else do I have on my list? In terms of classwork, a lot of the things you will learn are theoretical and not always applied. Professors will do the best job that they can to obviously cater this to financial mathematics, apply to finance, and stochastic. Most of it will be applied. In your statistics courses, it'll just be a bunch of master's, PhD students in mathematics or some physics, for example, and not necessarily finance. So you're going to want to figure out either on your own time through projects how to apply those things. In an interview, HR will not care if you know how to do some kind of complex stats application or some stats formula. They care how you can apply it. To that same point, interpreting what you're doing. If you're coding out some intense machine learning model, or you're building some stats model, or you're doing any kind of thing that involves math, there's a good chance that the person who you're presenting to, your audience, whether you're selling it at work, you're selling it to HR, you're talking to Professor Zorro, they're not going to be interested in the weeds of the math. So you need to be able to explain it in pure English, using addition, subtraction, multiplication. Anything past that, it's too complicated. Make it simple so the regular person can understand and begin to actually care about what you have to say. Otherwise, you will lose them. What else do I have on here? Applying everything. Oh, collaborating. Yes. This was a big thing that made, I think, last year pretty successful for the program. working with each other. Everyone has some skill set of math, computer science, and finance in here. Some people are good at one rather than the other. I have that exact problem. Big math, computer science, not so much in the finance. Basically find someone or a group of people who have the opposite skill set as you and work together with them. That will really help you when it comes to one classwork, two projects. You don't want to have a bunch of coders doing a finance project. That's not really helpful. Find someone who's good at finance, find someone who's good at computer science and math, and combine the skill set to deliver a product. That is one of the most helpful things I would suggest, especially when it comes to interview prep, for example. Quant jobs will have interview questions that span finance, pure finance, no math, rigorous mathematics, and then you'll see some computer science depending on jobs you're applying to sprinkled in there. So having a buddy, quote unquote, to help you prep for those interviews is very, very helpful to help you do the homeworks, think of things during projects to say and do. Very helpful. I think the most important thing is do not just sit around, go through the motions of classwork, get your grades and leave. If you have a 4.0 on your GPA, that's excellent, congratulations. But more often than not, in an interview, that 4.0 will pretty much mean minimal because the interviewer will ask you a question, you won't know the answer, and then your 4.0 is not a true 4.0. So what I would recommend is, again, as I said, applying what you know is way more important than the numbers, the GPAs. Communicating what you know. Basically, if you can't communicate, everything you know is not really worth anything. And then the other thing is, especially during capstone, this is very important for capstone specific stuff, is do not ask Professor Zorro what to do. Do not ask the industry sponsors what to do. That is your job, to figure out what to do and tell them what you will do. And they'll tell you if it's a good idea or a bad idea. The capstone is not a class. That is more of a consulting role where for a period of time you are documenting and you are giving ideas to solve the project or a problem rather than you being told what to do and going through the motions. I guess with that said, if anyone has any questions, I'll open it for a moment for a couple questions here. I'll put my email in the chat box, so if you guys have any questions, just send them to me. I'm happy to answer them. And feel free to reach out and just chat. I like to talk to people and learn kind of different perspectives. So feel free to do that. So with that said, I'll open it up for any questions anyone has. Professor, you're muted.
Jersey, any questions? Kiryu, Yang, any questions? What do you think? Is that your expectation when you came into the program? I can't hear you.
For me? Is that a question for me?
No, I'm asking her. I'm asking Kiryu, Yang.
Okay, I just think the most important thing just to figure out what you do and not ask from the faculties about what should I do or something else.
Well, basically what Brian is telling you is that you came in with the idea to study, but that it's only 50% of the job. So the sooner you get away from this idea, and that's why when I'm asking if you have any questions, is I want you to have questions, right? Because that kind of attitude is what's going to propel you to where Brian is, right? Which is basically to say, yeah, that's nice. I study all these things, but how do I have to convey that to people? And you're not going to convey with a grade. I mean, it's kind of a stamp of approval to say, okay, I made it through, but that's only half the job. And especially for foreign students. Yes, Brian.
Yeah, I would definitely say The GPA, actually, I'll talk about this. This is pretty important.
Yes.
Applying to quant jobs, whether that be algo trading, you know, a pricing desk, a risk desk, a portfolio construction on the buy side, everyone you speak to will come from Ivy League, Stanford's. Everyone competing for the same jobs are Ivy League, Stanford's, the Georgia Techs, the U Chicago's. Everyone has a 3.5 GPA. The interviewer will not be impressed with your 3.5 GPA. They will be impressed with your ability to convey complex things using addition, subtraction, and multiplication. They will be impressed with you challenging the status quo. That's why when professors are and I say the GPA is half the battle, it really is, because the people you're growing up against all have this GPA. So if you just have the GPA, that's not really gonna sway anyone any which direction. Frankly, half the people at some firms, they will just be unimpressed, period. Just because the people coming through in the competition. So again, half the battle really is the other stuff that's not in your day-to-day classes. Any other questions?
Rodrigo, what do you think about this?
No, I understand it. I think it's what we've been talking about for a while. And it's not what I thought from the first moment that I signed up for the program, but it's something I'm definitely on board with.
Yeah.
And yeah, looking forward to it.
I mean, and Rodrigo, you're right, unfortunately, right? Because when you go through the process, I mean, everyone tells you, well, go, sit, listen, join, study, graduate, and get the job, right? But 99%, right, of the communication is around the curriculum, the school, right, the grades, when it starts, when it ends, right? But that's because it's a lot easier to convey, right? What the stuff that Brian is talking about is how do you put this on a website, right? How do you explain to people you got to get a job, right? And not just a job, you're gonna get the job, right? You know, I mean, Brian and some of the other guys, and Yerin and people in the past also, yeah, you could get a quote unquote investment banking research job, right? At the end of the day, you're gonna get a job. That's not the point. The thing is, and Brian and I and a bunch of other people have lots of discussion is, yeah, but I want that quant job, right? I want that job that's gonna, with the right pay, obviously, but that's gonna make me use all the things that I've used. I just don't want to be a programmer, and I just want to do research, right? I want to combine everything together. That is a much more difficult thing to do. And you're not going to get it, as Brian mentioned, by competing with the other people just on the basis of a grade, right? I mean, Brian, what kind of question, you know, some of these guys have asked you?
Yeah, I'm glad Tim joined today. You heard me say these two things at the end. Some firms will go right at your throat and ask PhD level statistics questions. Other firms will just give you a case. Actually, so a lot of jobs that will involve, you know, more of a consulting, kind of like an internal consultant or like at the Big Four. It'll be more case based. It'll be like, here's the situation, here's the data. We have a model. The end client speaks no math, doesn't know how to code. Convey this in English. And if you use the word machine learning in your explanation, you won't get the next round, period. So learning how to take a textbook like this and translate it into addition, subtraction, multiplication, and addition is the most, personally speaking, given kind of the experience I had this summer doing internal AI consulting, is you need to figure out how to translate into layman's terms as soon as possible and as quickly as possible.
But for you to be able to do that, you really need to understand the topic, right? Because you need to understand it, right? Now, there's a movie called Margin Call, right? And you should watch that movie because there's a scene in there. It's about 2008 and all that stuff. But basically, at some point, there's a meeting room, right? And this analyst have found out that this firm is underwater because of its exposure to subprime mortgage portfolios. So you've got the guy. So they bring a guy from London. He comes into this office. He passes in the room. He sits down. He said, "What's going on? Explain to me what's happening." Right? So the boss, the managing director tried to explain it. Say, "Okay, but I want to hear from the person that discovered." So they get down to the analyst. So the analyst is talking to the head of the firm, and the guy tells him very simply, "I want you to explain this thing to me as if I was a golden retriever." Right? A 5-year-old child has to be able to understand, because if you get, as Brian mentioned, into machine learning and all your formulas, which you think makes you smart, they may not understand what you're talking about, and then you may not pass it. So this is key. I mean, you'll learn as you go along, but we're going to repeat a few times along the way, and you're going to have to implement it. And as soon as you start your project, bam, you're going to get into it. So speaking of projects, why don't we shift gear a little bit and hear from, Karen, why don't you tell us some of the projects that you're working on very quickly, but give us a feel for the sponsor, give us a feel for what you're trying to achieve and issues that you've encountered and things like that.
Sure. I have a slide ready.
Sure,
And
go
that
right
should
ahead.
help. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So just really quick, I'm gonna go with a Bitcoin trading strategy first. Just really quick, our team member, I'm working on it with Ramos, Chitari, who are coming into MSFE, and Ari, who is an undergraduate fellow on this. Also, the project is sponsored by Professor Zor and Hariam. Basically,
who is Arian, by the way? Who's Arian? No, he is. Oh, here we go.
So yeah, Hariam basically wrote the book about machine learning and data science. He will be sponsor our project, and mainly the book is about an algorithm that predicts a price for any financial entities. And this time we're going to apply it to the Bitcoin. And our goal is to apply his supervised learning Bitcoin model to the historical data and try to interpret the model and tweak it for the better performance. It's pretty straightforward project. However, the hard part is to understand the black box model itself. So what you learn from this project is first understanding the machine learning black box problem. The model is very hard. It has a lot of feature engineering, something like calculus oscillators. Second, you also gain exposure to Bitcoin, which is the biggest cryptocurrency market. It has a market cap of 642 billion, and it is considered a commodity by some and worthless by some others. So it's very interesting to look into this this financial asset, and we'll be using Python pandas for our data science work, and a bunch of interpretation libraries such as Eli5, Lime, and Chat. They're fairly standard for the industry. And once you understand how to apply these tools to a machine learning algorithm, you will have like a lot of skills in your armory. So yeah, that's basically for the project. Any questions? All right, cool. Another project I've been involved is the DeFi market analysis. This is more intense than the previous one in terms of knowledge. As you know, cryptocurrency is a really deep rabbit hole. I'm working on this one with Iran, who's an MFE student, and Artem, who's an undergrad in CSP. So I'm gonna give you like the very quick TLDR for the project. Basically, we're trying to work on the historical data for DeFi. First, does everyone understand what a DeFi is? I guess not. So I'll just briefly explain what DeFi is. So DeFi stands for decentralized finance. It is you can say it's a like subset of the cryptocurrency. Most applications that call themselves DeFi are built on top of Ethereum. And there's what's so special about it. It has a lot of smart contract and allows different, very different rules for the market and different styles. So there's a lot of things you can do, such as yield farm liquidity providing. I'm not gonna go into detail about each one of them, but what the project is trying to do is trying to get historical data. It's trying to get live data to understand how DeFi market functions and what other instrument of it. And in the end, we're trying to build a dashboard. So it will be a deliverable that kind of help us understand and help our sponsor, who is ETC Labs, to get an idea of how certain things are doing in the DeFi space. What we accomplished right now is the heavy research part. We also were able to build that data pipeline, and we learned how to pull ability directly from the Uniswap and Ethereum API. And what we're planning to do is to take all the knowledge we have learned before this to make it into probably like a dashboard. So all the decentralized exchanges work very differently from the centralized exchange. If you're interested in this, you can look them up, like Uniswap and SushiSwap. You can look out their protocol and smart contract, or you can ask me those questions. We also look into front running feasibility for a little bit for our sponsor, but I'm not going to go into detail there. But the most important part is what can you learn from this if you want to do this project. First, you will gain in-depth knowledge of DeFi, Ethereum, and crypto market. It's a very deep rabbit hole and is a novel concept. However, if you know and you learn those concepts well, and you're able to explain those complex concepts into like simpler terms, like Professor Zor just said, explain it. Maybe you can explain it to people high up, like they're a golden retriever. Then you're set for success. And secondly, you can also learn a lot of coding skill, mainly Python, from this. And you need to like know how to interact with GraphQL, DeFi application, and multiple APIs, third party or first party from the Uniswap. And you also need to learn. You get to learn like a lot of front end and back end stuff when it comes to building a dashboard. And I think those are a pretty valuable lesson to learn from this program. All right, that's it for the DeFi. Any questions?
No, I think you could stop sharing the screen.
Okay.
Obviously, I think everyone is a little bit shell-shocked, right? Because we are throwing all these things, and I'm showing all that stuff, and you got to choose, and they're probably moving in and going into their place or whatever, which is okay. I mean, I don't expect you to like be all over this thing very quickly, but this is kind of the expectation is as soon as possible. Now, I know that Charles has a project. I know some of you have already picked a project. Wenxi, did you pick a project yet?
Yeah. I have picked up the project about the interpretability of the deep learning with Byron.
But are you been on the project with Brian, or you
No.
speak in your head?
No. I have registered for the project. I have sent you the email.
Yeah, but I think you're gonna have to talk to, yes, the thing is, they're already well advanced. Not all projects are available for everyone anytime you want, right? We're gonna have to talk to Brian to see if there's room for you to do anything. Because they're already well
Okay.
on their way. So you can't just show up in the middle and say, okay, now I want to do this project. We say, well, I started 3 months ago. Right?
Okay,
You have to
okay, I
catch
got it.
up pretty quickly. So what I would do, while these people are presenting, this is not for free. You want to listen to this project and say, well, okay, that could be of interest to me in case we go to Brian and his team and they say, well, I mean, what is he going to do? I mean, you could, but it's okay. You could still be part of the project and do a small part. So it may not be enough. That's why I think one project may not be enough. You may need to do 2 projects. So you look at 10% of it on one, and then 25%, and then 50%. I mean, a guy
Okay.
like Charles is probably lucky because he's starting with a brand new project. Well, we'll see. So it's not a brand new, it's a continuation of a project. Let's see how much work there is in it. So as you're listening to this project, don't take it as it's just a presentation. Great, thank you. No, these are live projects. If you think you like what you hear, then you could be part of that project as well. Depending, I think DeFi probably could use some work, but they need specific skills. And if you're coming in, you have no Python skills whatsoever. You're gonna have to catch up pretty quickly. Maybe Shatali could explain to her a feeling what she's done so far, because she is joining and she had started on one project already, and she had some interesting thoughts yesterday. Shatali, can you hear me?
Yes, Professor. Yeah. So as I mentioned yesterday, yes, initially the projects were, I felt they were too much to take on. It was kind of overwhelming. But trust me, just give it some time. It's just a matter of a couple of days. And yes, the data camp courses are important. Just don't get overwhelmed. I think it should be good. Yeah.
Yeah, and that same spirit, right, needs to carry through the job search. And actually for you, it's going to be the internship search, right? You're going to
Yes,
need to, right? Go ahead.
also the fact that team spirit is everything. I'm so glad that I've been working with Ari and Kiran and Ramos, who there are times when we have meets with Hariom every Monday. We're not prepared with stuff, and we'd like the week before we'd catch up every day, try to schedule our timings. We were staying continents apart, but I think what also is important is a team that you're working with. They're amazing bunch of people who know so much, most of the time so much more than what you do. But so yeah, yes, teamwork is something which it's just been a while, but yes, I really do appreciate that.
Remus, you've been around for a while now, since you were involved as an undergraduate. Give me some thought on this.
I would say it could be a little bit overwhelming at the beginning with the whole coding thing. You don't know where to start, but data camp definitely helped a lot. And also something I learned from the hard way is that you cannot be scared of new things, and you have to just try your best to catch on. Definitely had some conversations with Kieran and also people like Brian and Steven from last year. I learned a lot of new things, and also just feel like one thing is you have to be really proactive in terms of projects or internship, networking with people. You can't just sit there and hope that something good is going to come. Definitely having the effort to learn how to code and to participate, be proactive is the most important thing.
Okay. Next, hey, Michael and Jack, why don't you guys talk to us about 2 things. First, talk to us about the project, the sport analytics. And then talk to us a little bit, because it's part of your capstone, the work you're doing with the other guys, with that private equity firm.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, guys. I'm Michael. I started a year ago in this program. So my main capstone that I'm working on, Jack is working on, who's the phone number in the call, and then another guy who's not in this meeting, is what we're calling sports analytics. And so the intro idea was, with the expansion and the legalization of sports betting in the US, we felt like we wanted to explore ways to explore that and exploit that market to make money. And so after some research and some brainstorming, we came up with the idea of, instead of trying to beat the books by being better than the books, which is very hard because they're good at what they do in terms of setting proper lines and pricing things correctly and taking a premium off the top, what we decided was a viable strategy was hedging books against each other when the books priced the same prop differently. And so what that means is we go into multiple different books pricing the same option, and we hedge them against each other so that they cover the other's losses, but there's also a chance to win both of those. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the sports betting market, that's all right. We're essentially treating the sports betting market as if it's an options market, and basically trying to build a low risk / arbitrage model to come up with a portfolio on it. And so within that, the tools that we're using are, and Jack can touch on this a little bit more because he's kind of headed this up, but we have to scrape data in order to create a data set to back test this. And we also have to develop probability models for each of the priced options. So Jack, I don't know if you want to talk more about the technicalities.
Yeah, I can talk about that for a little bit. When it comes down to sort of the technical aspects of it, we're scraping live data from a sports betting website that aggregates about 5 different books, the same lines on that. So we routinely scrape when sports are in season. So NFL will be starting here soon. We're going to start pulling from that, and we have this thing that we call a back test, but it's really more so for defining strategy. We go over all of the data that we've scraped, sorry. And we go through and we kind of construct retrospective portfolios, so to speak, and it helps us kind of define our strategy, look at the different effects different probability estimates have, in terms of, because the way that we price it is we base it off of expected value. So probability will have, the probability is going to have a big impact on that, and it's going to influence what we choose. So that's kind of the more behind the scenes part of it. And then eventually we hope to build the live position, picking into the scraping itself, so that, if there is an arbitrage opportunity that exists between 2 different books, we should be able to identify and pick that position as soon as it becomes available on the website we scrape from.
And without getting too much into the weeds, obviously there's technicalities that you guys probably can't follow because we're just talking about that. And I understand from your point of view that it's hard to follow, but it's been great to explore a new market and encounter problems and learn how to work together to deal with those problems. Like, we do a good job as a team of taking on different responsibilities and communicating with each other. And when we run into issues, we talk about together and we work through it, because I think the goal of these projects is not to know exactly what you're doing when you get into it. It's to encounter problems and learn how to work through the problems. So that's the overarching message with that.
I guess I can touch on the other project a little bit. I know there's a certain level of confidentiality, but I can be a little bit vague with it. So what we're doing is we're essentially it's a fintech startup company that's basically building an automated loan model. So new companies come to the company we're working for, and they're looking for money. And so what Jack and I have been doing specifically is we're helping to create a forecasting model of the company's revenues based on previous revenues and market factors to basically project their future revenues in order to come up with proper terms to offer them for their loan. And so we actually have been able to apply some of our learnings from our other project to this project in terms of how we work with probabilities and in terms of how we forecast a little bit.
What are some of the skills, the coding skills you had to familiarize yourself with? Show us a little bit when you started this thing, were you like a Python guy? Let them.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I was very well versed in R, with only a basic understanding of Python, and I think everyone else in the project was more Python based. So we've transitioned over to Python, which is, for those of you wondering who don't have that much coding knowledge, Python's definitely the language to get into because it kind of covers everything, and most coding in the future will be done in Python, at least for the near future. But it's learning like modeling techniques and machine learning and applying those statistical techniques that you'll learn into an automated type of method.
Yeah, and I can also kind of, I can add to that a little bit. I mean, I think it's important to know languages that are useful and stuff like that with this project. But what I've kind of realized the more and more that I've worked on this is it comes down more so to understanding sort of the base computer science behind how some of this works, the logic that the computer is using to figure this out. And because between different languages, a lot of it is just differences in syntax and different packages or methods that can be used. Some are easier, some are different, and just kind of quirks between them. But if you really sort of focus on kind of the computer logic and how all of these ideas work, they're all transferable between languages. So it really comes down to just understanding that, and then you're able to really grow from there.
Right. So let me get a polling going here. Just want to, before we go with the other project. Mfe, what are your coding skills? What do you know in terms of coding?
I learned C program and SQL in my undergraduate, and I know a little of Python and a little of MATLAB, and that's all.
Okay, so you're definitely gonna need some. What about you, Yichin Su?
I know something about the R language, and I self-study about the Python. I'm just start to learn, so I know a little bit about the C program. That's it.
Yeah, so you're kind of same category. You're gonna need to, I mean, as Brian mentioned, yes, it's okay to use DataCamp, but you're gonna need something else, right? And that's gonna have to go through the projects on your own, believe it or not. Rodrigo, what about you?
I'm a bit rusty on my coding, but I have pretty good basis on R and C. I'm just getting into Python. but I have a good R basis. So
Okay, so you're kind of in the same category of these guys when they started last year. So the faster you get, want to make sure whatever project you get has to have some Python in it. What about you, Charles?
Pretty good in C.
Okay.
I need to get with I need to get on Python.
Yeah, I don't know, Brian, Michael, and Aaron. I'm assuming that Python is this is where they've gone. You haven't seen any C.
I do want to make a comment though.
Yeah.
The fact that you, Charles, if you're claiming you're as good as at fluent, quote unquote fluent, I'll say fluent at C, and some of you other folks mentioning C, that is a huge advantage over folks who are just Python, learning it via copying code off Stack Overflow. I'm assuming you guys are actually understanding what the computer is doing. And I'm glad Jack Dean brought that up. Too many people are copying code and pasting it with the hopes that it works. Actually understanding how the computer works is important, and knowing C is a demonstration of such. So picking up Python will be a breeze for you folks. As you all know, Python is built on C, so that should not be an issue.
Okay. That is a sigh of relief.
Yeah, I also have one more comment in regards to the programming language. My 2 cents on the programming language is that it's better that you are well versed in one language than you know a little bit about everything. So, at least get fluent in one language. I think that would help a lot. And my way of working through picking of one language, if you want to start somewhere, is looking for the job description of your ideal job. Like whatever you want to do, look for the job description and see what the language they are asking for. And maybe you can go from there.
Jersey, what is your situation?
I learned MATLAB in undergrad, and then I had like half a semester of C in undergrad.
Okay, so whatever project you pick, and keep in mind, when I say pick a project, you might or might not be in a capstone. I mean, you should all be in professional development. Great, Matthew just joined us. He's on the West Coast. Sorry about that. So Jersey, you need to. So when I say join a project, yeah, obviously, if you're going to do a capstone, you're going to need to have a project. But you also should join a project to get on the idea of learning your coding skills, right? Because if you don't take the capstone this year and you wait next year, so what? For an entire year, you're not going to do anything except your curriculum. That's not going to cut it. Because if you go, as Brian mentioned, right, if you want to interview for position for internships, right, you're not going to interview in May. In fact, some of the interviews already passed, right? You're going to interview in a month or 2, maybe 3 months max. It's going to happen now. So you need your skills, because they're going to talk to you and say, what do you know? I say, well, I don't know. I just joined. Well, I tell you what, once you learn, then you come back. So you already missed opportunities right there. So the sooner you get on a project, any project, even if it's to hold the door, so that and as long as obviously you do coding, that is important. So forget the capstone. You need a project for that purpose alone. So at least when you interview, you're able to talk about things, right? What about you, Kiyu Young?
Yeah, and I just know how to use the views about the correlation analysis. And I'm in the process of learning data structure in the Python.
Okay, what else do we have? Did I miss anyone here? What about Sinley? Sinley, what about you? Yero, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you tell me about your coding skills?
Yeah, I learned MATLAB before, and I'm not that familiar with other programming language, but I'm self-learning the Python right now.
Okay. Ritesh, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Where are you? At the airport? In India? In the US?
I'm in US.
Okay, great, fantastic. So what is your what are your coding skills like?
It's R, a lot of Java, PLSQL, a little bit of MATLAB, C, C++, stuff like that.
So you look more advanced than everyone else here, to me. So you've done these things before.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Ritesh, don't forget you need to register to GBUS 484.
Okay.
Okay. All right. And next, let's Yiren, why don't you tell us about your project, the financial equation?
Yeah, I'll briefly touch on the financial equation project. Basically, I'm also working with the books author in machine learning and finance book author. This project is more have a clear goal than the other projects that I've been working on. So basically, right now we're at the stage of applying a specific Python package, which is called AI Feynman, and apply those to generated financial data and see how the package performs. And in the future, and I'm also going to trying to expand the project and apply it to real world financial data and see how it performs, and maybe potentially compare the package with some other packages, symbolic regression. So I guess it's the skill set required of the team members is basically Python, that's a requirement, and machine learning skills, and also mathematics skills. Be able to deduct mathematical functions, and that's basically it.
So basically you're trying to, this is the most interesting project because it's kind of out there a little bit, right? He wants to be able to convert, because you were looking at the Black-Scholes equation, to convert the equation into
right now it's the reverse stage. We are using the Black-Scholes equation and generate the data, and then let the model perform on the generated data and to see how the package performs. But why we are doing that is to see how well the package performs in the complexity, for example, the Black-Scholes equation. And then we can use the package to apply to real world financial data. That's the end goal, I guess.
So how was your trip, I guess, right? From when you started with your coding skills, and then, because I know that you've been coding an entire summer for this thing, so.
Yes, I wasn't an expert in Python. I wasn't really an expert like in computer science, but I have learned C++ before. And during the classes, we use R mostly, especially for the Lehigh mathematics or some of the engineering classes. But Python, I think once you understand at least one language and understand how the computer works, well, it's so much easier. You can just pick up any other language, basically, especially things like Python.
Correct. Okay, so if somebody asked me a question, say, what do we need? Do we need to get a project? And I'm throwing lots of things at you very quickly, but you know, you don't have that much time. So you know, the sooner you feel the urgency, the better off you're going to be. So basically, you need a project for your capstone, right? But it has to be a meaningful project, or you could take two less meaningful projects if you have to. I mean, Remus and Karen, I think, has like 3 projects, right? So it's okay as long as together they form meaningful amount of work. So that's one thing. The second thing is, as I said before, you need to be constantly working on a project because A, it's going to make you work with other people, right? So it forces you to that interaction. And I know as you're coming in, you're like a little bit shell-shocked. Oh, I thought I was just going to come in and sit down and do what they want me to do, and then I'm done with this. That's not going to happen this way. What you want to do is you want to be able to practice what you've learned, and the project will force you to learn new skills. Oh, by the way, I just want to let you know, and maybe Brian could talk about interpretability a little bit, but for this project, but basically you're going to learn things in or topics in your project that have nothing to do with the curriculum. So think of it as another curriculum. Don't think of it as, oh, I'm going to go to class and then I'm going to apply what I've learned in the curriculum. Not really. I mean, you maybe by the time you graduate, you say, oh, okay, now I understand what this was about, but not at the beginning, right? You want to be in that stage that Chatela is in, right? She came from India. She was start doing it over there. Now she's in the US and she's doing it on campus, but she was totally confused at the beginning. I want you to be confused. I want you to be challenged, right? And at the same time, you know, as you could hear when Jeroen is talking about, these are interesting projects. Right? Brian, can you tell the crew a little bit about your project about interpretability?
Yeah, I can get we're doing some stuff on the app, so I can't actually show the physical app. But in essence, back to the point of conveying complex things using addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Basically, we have a trading strategy that uses reinforcement learning. I won't get into the weeds, but in essence, it's a form of AI that basically learns its environment and then makes kind of decisions based on actions that maximize a certain return. So in trading, right, it's gonna be P&L. So specifically profit and loss, for just to make it simple here. So basically the difficult part is like this algorithm is known to make money. But if you were a investor in my fund, if I couldn't explain to you how this algorithm works in certain market conditions, you would probably not write me a big check. So the idea of the project is to understand how this reinforcement learning algorithm is working in a given time period and kind of in a given trading window. And so to do that, basically we're extracting certain data points as the algorithm learns, and then just creating a simple dashboard, all in Python. The words Power BI, the words Tableau, never to be used. Honestly, that is not what this purpose of the program is, and obviously neither for this specific project. So this is all being done using the Dash framework in Python, which is basically a wrapper to Flask. And so wrapper to Flask, CSS, and HTML. In essence, we're building this dashboard. So a trader who doesn't know any RL and is merely just watching the system run, right, can understand the movements in the algorithm and the decisions it's making, and where the alpha is being generated. So again, all Python based, with some database work in the back end. Someone did mention, on a side note, someone mentioned SQL, 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 whatever you want to call it. I'd like to debunk the myth that that is not a coding language. That is a tool to build software and move data from one point to another. It is not a coding language. So I just wanted to mention that. That's a skill that every quant will have, whether you learn it in school or as a software engineer. You kind of just need that to pull information from a database, but that is not a coding language. That's kind of the gist.
Nice. I have, so we have Matthew on the West Coast, and Matthew is doing some interesting work on covered rate parity.
Yeah.
Matthew, why don't you tell the tell the crew a little bit, first of all, what is covered rate parity, because this is more of a less quantity project. It's more of a financial project, but it's got tied to obviously blockchain. So take us through that process of it so they have a feel for what's going on there.
Sure. So covered interest rate parity is sort of like a law in finance. It pretty much exists because if it's really reinforced through like arbitrageurs essentially taking advantage of dislocations typically, and you'll see it in like international money markets. And it's basically like, if you know, it's basically says that the forward and the spot prices of two currencies can be determined by the differential in their interest rates, is like pretty much the short version of it. And so what I did is I took that and I applied that to the cryptocurrency space, where it's not as, it's a bit more infantile of a space, and it has less market efficiency than your typical financial foreign exchange markets. And so I thought, okay, the thinking was, hey, this is a less efficient market. We can probably see some more deviation here in this argument. And is it possible to take advantage of and implement a trading strategy around the deviation? And so I looked at various cryptocurrencies. I think I looked at 7 of them, all that have weekly expiring futures contracts and lending and borrow products available on a couple different exchanges. And I developed a trading strategy and back tested it based off of this signal. I used Python to do all of it and the exchange APIs. And, it seems in the back test seems pretty good. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm using I have a demo account with one of the exchanges, and I have, demo money in there. And so I'm basically working on implementing it in a demo trading account to track kind of throughout the rest of my time here. And that's basically the project at this point.
So basically, you're looking to take advantage of the inefficiency in the blockchain market and apply cover rate. So what's interesting with your project as well is that you're going to be presenting at the conference. You're going to do a podcast on it. Mm-hmm. Right. And so the issue with people like Matthew and Brian and Aaron and Kieran is that they have a different set of challenge on their hands. So now they got the project. Now they got the coding, and they could talk intelligently about certain concepts. But now they need to gear up for May and to start interviewing for jobs, right? And what I mean by that is you need to interview now or soon, right? So I'll be working with Matthew and Brian and these guys and Aaron to start exposing them to specific opportunities, but also they have to look on their own as well to find jobs and to develop the network. So Matthew, Matthew and Aaron are a bit unusual because they have had jobs before, right? Unlike most of you coming just fresh out of undergraduate. So Matthew, what do you do with networking? What's your take on it? How do you manage what we call networking?
So for me, I've always been a person who relied on their school network. That's how I got my first job out of undergrad was based on basically a career fair at school. And then I have various connections from, I did an MBA at UCLA. So I have connections over there. And then here I've been exposed to people and opportunities from Professor Zorro that I'm actually starting to get interest in. So I would say try and take advantage of the opportunities presented to you through school is probably because it's kind of like you have almost a foot in the door. Like people will listen to you. People kind of want to help out if you're, a graduating student, especially if you're an alumni from their school. It's a lot easier, I would say, to find a job as a graduating student than as a mid-career, pivoter or something like that. Or so I would say take advantage as much as you can of those opportunities. And other than that, the other good advice I got, which I haven't actually, admittedly haven't done yet myself, but I'm going to do, is look at your own network of people that you know, and think about like 3 to 5 people that you know that you could reach out to who are either doing what you want to do or work at a company that you want to work for. Think about those people, and think about how you're going to reach out to them, and then do it. And like make contact, just put it in their mind. Say, hey, I'm, I was thinking about this company, and I remembered you worked here. Just wanted to say hi, and see how you're doing. Hey, I'm going to be graduating in a couple months, or a few months, or 6 months, or 8 months, or whatever. In my case, 9 months. So just keep me in mind, that sort of thing. So that would be my recommendation. That's kind of what I'm trying to do, and would be probably my recommendation for all of you.
I have that already. Yeren, what is your approach?
I guess I'm not a really huge networking person.
That's why I'm asking
you. Yeah, maybe I can share some of my lessons that I've learned. So first of all, I guess my situation is a little bit different because I really applied for a master's degree with a different mindset because I wanted to switch the direction of my career. So I guess one of the first thing foremost, what would you want to do after you graduate? And I do realize as an international student myself, I know a lot of international students also in this program, we do face another challenge, whether you go back home, whether you stay here, and sponsorship and all that sort of things. But so I think one of the most questions that I really need to ask myself is that what do I really want to do? So you have to be focused on what you want to do and start developing in that direction, because there are so many potential job positions that you could apply for: investment banking, quant, whatever, like consulting, data science. These jobs, before I joined, I didn't really know the difference between all those positions, but do research early on and find the path that you want to follow, and then do some networking and really hone your technical skills as well, I guess, especially if you want to apply for technical positions. So start early and be active. I think that's the key.
Yurio, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
So tell us a little bit now from your end. What do you understand networking? What do you plan on doing for networking?
Okay, for me.
You're in the US, right?
No,
I mean,
I'm still in China.
But you're going to be coming to the US at some point?
Yeah, soon, probably next week or.
Okay, exactly. So once you're here, what are you thinking in terms of networking?
Well, what I'm thinking about networking, I think it's basically some coding stuff. So
what?
Basically, I'm thinking about some coding stuff. Like people are working on office and click the computer, something like that. So
Oh boy.
that was like pretty
Oh
hard.
boy. Yeah, that is networking. That's right. That's a network.
Yeah,
But when
that,
I'm thinking
that was
networking, I'm thinking, what are you going to do when you're here
like,
to enhance your network to get a job? Or in your
well,
case, an internship.
yeah, actually, I'm pretty interested in some like financial mathematics.
Oh no, I know that you're interesting and I know that you're going to want a job. What I want to know
Yeah.
is how are you going to go about doing it? How are you going to enhance your network?
I'm not sure. I'm kind of having
Exactly.
no
That's
idea.
okay. I mean, you're not supposed to
Yeah.
know at this point, but that is something that you're going to need to focus. Wangxi, what about you?
First of all, I think I might have to meet more people and know their field, like what they're going to do in the future. So in future, if I need something, I know that who is the guy I have to looking for. And the second is, for now, I think I have to practice my English because I don't want to be inclined because my English understanding. And the next thing is that I think networking is happening every time and everywhere. So just be warm and be open to everyone. So I think that will help in the future.
Exactly. I think that's the right attitude. You need to, because I mean, as student, you have one issue, as Brian talked about, and the other, and Yuran and Karen, is that you got to be able to explain something very easily. So that's one issue. So you're going to need to go behind the technology and all that. But then, right, because you don't know who you're going to be facing. But then on top of that, as a foreign student, you got to make sure that when you speak, that you come across, I mean, that they could understand you literally.
Yeah.
And the way you do that is, as you get involved in several projects, right, you are going to be forced to discuss. Hopefully, I don't want you to work with other Chinese students, because then if you turn to Chinese, that's great, but that's not going to help you. I want you to get with non-Chinese people, so it forces you to really express yourself in ways that and you have time, technically speaking, you have 2 years. But you don't have that much time, right? Because on top of that, let's not forget the curriculum also, right? You have to get through that thing. So you have lots of things going on at the same time. So this is not going to be a walk in the park. It's going to be a fast walk. You're going to look at the flowers, you're going to look at the trees. Okay, I was there. And then you're going to move and move and move and move as quickly as possible. Because I will tell you, the people like Matthew and Yerin and Brian, and they're looking, right? They're looking, and the problem is that it's not easy to find out where to look, right? I mean, in the course site at 484, I've listed a bunch of internship for the summer, right? And also jobs going forward, quant jobs. The only thing is, that's okay, right? The thing is, but you can't just apply. You have to be ready to interview as well. Again, the good news is you only need one job, right? So you don't need 10 jobs, you need one. But still, you need to practice, you need to get in that mindset, right? That's why I'm making sure in this thing, I'm not just doing all the talking. You guys have to tell me a little bit, because I got a feel for the room. I have to, if I get a job request right tomorrow for, I want an undergraduate for my firm, it's going to be tough for me to say, well, people, you should look at this person, because none of you have very strong, coding skills yet, right? And you could interview, they'll talk to you, but then you'll fail because, just not there. So the faster you get there, the faster it's going to be. You have data camp and you have your projects. As soon as possible, you want to get that. Rodrigo, what is your approach for what you're thinking when you're thinking networking?
Well, I agree with Matthew here. I think to use the tools that the school gives us. I think it's a good approach, especially when it's a bunch of new people and we don't know each other from many parts of the world. So I think that's the safest approach and the one that I was thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to start with that.
Yeah.
And obviously, Rodrigo, you have a huge advantage because your English is perfect. I mean, that helps, believe it or not. Plus, I'm sure you have a second language too. So
Yeah.
that's even better. But yes, definitely start with it. And at 12 o'clock, I'm going to introduce you to, and that's someone that I want you to talk to as part of your requirement for 484. Her name is Anne-Mette. She's going to bring you in this world. And she knows lots of firms because she helps the MBAs and the masters in management. So she has a broader view, but she talks to lots of students and she has a very unique approach to help you. I mean, one word that she keeps using, and then she will tell you about it, it's stewardship, right? You're not here to be taken by the hand and to the classes, to the grades, and then here's the job and you graduate and you're done. Now you're gonna have to decide what it is that you want to do, what is it that you want to study, and not what you want to study, what you want to work on your project, but what kind of job you want, right? Rodrigo, maybe you feel like the project that you're taking, which is multi-factor investing, is financing, right? It's about multi-factors. But when these guys worked on that last year, there was also a fair amount of coding as well, right? And then you'll work with Jordan, worked on that project last year. Now he's at Hamilton Lane as an analyst, and he'll coach you through what he thinks the next step should be. So as you go through this process, you'll talk to Jordan, right? You'll work with Charles and maybe somebody else to see if there's room for someone else. Right. So you're going to expand your network that way. Always keep thinking in those terms. Because at the end of the day, what matters for you right now, your focus really, what it should be, is you need to get an internship for the summer. That's your job, number one. And unfortunately, for you to get the job for the internship for the summer, they're not going to interview in May. They have started interviewing now. So how are you going to fit yourself in well, first you need a resume, but how are you going to fit yourself in that interview is by at least having a project on there, right? And you could start on it and you could start talking, having some views. I mean, sometimes it's not fair because you say, well, I just started. Yeah, but that's how it is. I mean, they're not going to wait that long. Of course, the longer you wait and the closer the internship comes to be, then the less interesting the internships are, unfortunately. Because these are the ones that no one wants, or they couldn't get anyone, and now you're doing some research somewhere. I mean, it could be something to do. You could do some research somewhere in New York and be interesting, but it's not, the IMC. We'll have IMC Global at 11:45 today, right? Type of internships, right? Where it's very, very, very quiet. Remus, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so I want to talk to you and I want to talk to Karen about that. So this sounds very great. You do the project and you learn a bunch of things, yeah. But I want to tell me, and you've gone through some issues in the past, right? I'm thinking falling knives, right? I'm thinking, and Karen will talk about his own issue. I mean, one thing also I want to forewarn you is that like all project, it's not, a walk in the park because now you're not on your own, you're dealing with other people, right? So Remus, talk to us a little bit about that. How's it?
So I guess the issue that we had before is that we have scheduled meeting every week, just like sometimes twice a week, as for most of the project. I believe like every single project you should meet once a week at least. But the thing is, every week we come into this meeting, we need to have a certain expectation. So I personally like to just send it to the group chat, like what should we be doing and what have we talked about. And I think it's very important for anyone, no matter how good your coding skill is, no matter what task you are assigned to, maybe just, brainstorming, researching on Google, or just doing a lot of hard coding, be really proactive. And I think Professor Zoro and Brian has stressed this multiple times. This is not the curriculum that is like a group project. You're not going to get any guidelines. You're not going to get a grading or a rubric. So the problem before was that we have a meeting at week 1 and we have assigned a couple tasks for members, and then we come back. No one has anything valuable to contribute, and then the next week would be the same thing. So the project is not really moving anywhere. And I think that especially for international students with the English part, I would say, as an international student myself, don't be afraid to communicate. Don't be afraid to talk to your classmates at MFE. And it is really about how proactive and how much you really participate. And I believe that is the best way to get your English at par. And also just make sure that you're attending the meetings. You're not trying to skip, and you're trying to really contribute. And even like with some of the projects that I did, for example, with Kieran, I wasn't the best at coding, and everyone has already started. I came in late, but having the right attitude, knowing that this is supposed to be challenging, this is supposed to be something that has no guideline, that has no faculty members holding your hands, telling you what to do. I think that's a very important part. But yeah, so be proactive again, and also I want to add something about the networking part. I had a lot of good experience at Lehigh Connect. It's you can connect with a bunch of not MFE, but Lehigh alumni, and they're always happy to help, to even just tell you what they're doing, how's their experience. And I do have 3 instances that I get to talk to someone who's already in the company, and they're willing to make the connection for me to talk to HR or their manager. So don't be shy. Don't feel like, okay, I just came in, I don't know a lot of things. We all have our own value, and everyone's different. So yeah, that's it.
Yes, one thing I have to tell you is you have a bunch of different projects out there, right? You've got the Matthew project, which is basically him in one person. Okay. Then you've got and that's what I want Kevin to talk to us about. You have the Karen, Yeren, and Autumn project, which you have 3 people, but then you have 2 person on the other side with the sponsor. And the more people, unfortunately, that you have in a team, there's a dynamic that happens. So, and that's why the worst situation that we've had is at one point we had 7 students on one project. That just doesn't work. Okay. So I'm going to see the size of the projects. If the project already has 3 people in it, I doubt very much we're going to have 2 or 3 more, right? Because then you got to meet, then you got to talk, you got to find your way, you got to get along with the people. It becomes a different dynamic that you have to deal with. Now, obviously, and I think guys like Charles already approached me, if you have your own project, that's even better, right? Because now I could find at some point a sponsor to work. I mean, make no mistake, but the Matthews project, that was his idea, right? And he's working with Quantinsti in India. Oh, he's actually from Morgan Stanley now. So he's working with Morgan Stanley on that project. The sport analytics was a project from a student. He's not here today, but that was kind of his brainchild. The one that you're working on, Rodrigo, multi-factor investing, that was from another student as well. So it's okay to have your own projects, right? Again, don't feel that you just have to sit there and take it in. You could have your own interaction as well. That's That's very important. Karen, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience as well? What you think about the dynamic, the team, the confusion sometimes that occurs with the sponsor of the project.
Sure. I can speak from experience on my side about specific on DeFi. So specifically, DeFi is a very hard topic. It's a very deep rabbit hole. What happened in our project is the rabbit hole eventually got too deep that everyone is kind of lost on a direction that we want to take the project in, and our sponsor is they're not going to tell you what to do. They're right. You're basically on your own researching, and you want to do the do the part that helps them the most, and also you want to be learning from the project, and that could like create a conflict. But I think this is all part of the journey. As you're gonna go into the real world when you find a job, it's going to be the same dynamic. You will have people coming in and going out of the project. You will have to, work with your coworkers and tackle a problem like a team. I think the best strategy is to be open, transparent about the issue you think the project's having, and communicate it to your teammates, so we can all like tackle the problem as a team. Another thing I want to speak specifically for international students about on networking is you can take networking. You don't have to take it as serious as you think, but treat everything like a practice or interview. You can start with your classmate, alumni that has a closer relationship to Lehigh. You can simply just ask for information to find to know a little bit about an industry or each other or a company. There's a lot of information you can acquire from the interview, and it will help you get your talking skills. It will help you get your interview skills and how to present yourself. But my point is to start doing them, start networking, and have those practice. So when you come to an actual job interview, you'll be better prepared.
Yes, and that's why you're going to need to realize that realize it's a lot of information I'm throwing at you. You're going to pick up on some of the stuff and not on everything, but they'll come to you. But as opposed to last year, I want you guys to hit that ground running right away to realize what needs to be done. So Yero, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Tell us a little bit more what is it that you're doing in terms of what you think, what your vision of networking is going to be.
Okay, so I think basically just talk to people.
Yeah, that's true. You're gonna have to talk to people, but how'd you get to these people?
Well, like you're probably gonna do more interviews, and
But how'd you get to the interviews?
well, there are just so many ways to getting the interviews. Like you can post your information online or looking for other interviews, or there are some, I think Lehigh has some centers, like interview center or something.
Okay, so that's a good point that you're making. Let me diffuse this idea right away. The best jobs are never advertised. I know Remus is laughing because he says, "Oh my God, that's exactly what we did last year." No, it's not going to be like that, right? I know it sounds so much easier, right? You're coming in and you're just going to say, "Okay, here's my resume. Where are the jobs? Where are they? Oh, here. No. That's because if you see them, there's 1,000 of other people watching them as well. And you don't want to compete with these people. I mean, maybe some of you are going to be lucky enough to get through the interview and get through the end or whatever, right? But with all the items that we talked about before, the resume, the CV, the resume, the grade, and then you have to explain yourself. and you have to have the coding skills, and you have to be able to explain, and it has to be the right job for you. By the time you've done all this, you're probably not going to get it. What you want to do is you want to get the job without the CV. That is what you have to start thinking. You have to be able to get that job just by networking. So forget the resume. I mean, yeah, okay, fine. The resume is a little bit like the curriculum.
Mhm.
So what you need to do is, well, why are you going to hire me with that? Well, guess what? They have, for example, Yeren right now and Kieran are working on this DeFi project that you mentioned. Okay, fine. They're developing their skills. Everybody's okay on that end. They learn about the market DeFi. But they're also working with Ethereum Classic, Ethereum. I mean, they're working with a guy called Chris. He's in, so Chris is in Greece, and they're working with Luke, who's in Spain, right? So at some point this year, I haven't told them that yet, but that's kind of the plan. We're going to start poking at these two guys and say, okay, is there any kind of opening, you know, anywhere, really? So obviously, Karen has been working closely with Chris and Luke, and they know Karen, right? They have a feel for what he does, right? They never seen his resume. They don't know what kind of grade he had in math or in engineering or whatever, right? All they know is, well, you know, Karen, you know, came to me and he had some interesting questions and blah, blah, blah. So there's a job somewhere, right? They're going to think Karen first before a bunch of other people because he has worked with them. That is, of course, you say, but that's only one project. Yeah, I know, right? But you don't have to do one project. When I'm asking you to go to conferences, I'm not just asking you to go there so you could learn about the latest topics. No, when you go to conferences, you will see lots of topics and lots of speakers. If you're working on something interesting, or if you find a topic of interest, then you get in touch with this person and say, hey, my name is so-and-so, my name is Rodrigo, I'm working on a project having to do with multi-factor, and I noticed that you're also talking about this, and you know, would it be interesting, would you like to see what I have to do, blah, blah, blah. The reason why BNP Asset Management is working with is a corporate sponsor for the sport analytics is because Jordan, that worked on the multi-factor investing, and that's the other thing that's going to happen as you work on all these projects. You're going to find, I need more information, as Shetali told you, right? Need more information. Where am I going to get it? Then he started looking around at conferences, at papers, at people, right? He ended up talking to this guy over at BNP Paribas, Ben Steiner, on a totally different project. I mean, for him, it was the same project. But then I contacted Ben. I said, hey, would you like to be interested in looking at this project for us? And he did. So that is networking. That is what you need to do. Right? So when Jack and Michael and the other Jack are looking, which they're looking now, at some point we're going to hit, you know, we're going to talk to Ben Steiner at BNP Asset Management. Hey, you know, these guys are graduating. Is there anything going on in your shop? So obviously, have 1,000 resumes they're going to get. Once they get Mike Nelson's resume, oh yeah, that's the guy that worked on the that interesting project on sport analytics. Oh, let me talk to him. See what I mean? He doesn't have to show his resume technically. So you've got to forget this idea that you're going to post your resume somewhere and you're going to, you know, apply for that job. I mean, it's great for them, for the people looking for somebody, right? But you want to get the job that's of interest to you. And that's a little more complicated. That's going to take you more time to get around to do it. And the sooner you start, the better you're going to be. Now, let me stop right now because I have John Engleson that just joined us. John, can you hear us?
Absolutely.
Great.
Actually, I've been here for a while listening.
No, I know
to,
you've been in and out. So,
yeah,
and it's
very
good. So at
interesting
least you have a
dialogue.
better feel. So I'm just going to let John introduce himself because I still don't know what he really does. All I know is he's going to invite us at his huge house with his pool and his complex when this COVID thing is over.
Absolutely.
We'll definitely have some party over it.
We'll definitely have a big party at some point. But
so,
and I've had the privilege of working with about I guess about a third of the people on the call. So I appreciate everybody. So it's
John, you have about 30
day.
minutes. Go ahead and tell us about what they should know.
Right. So I think that the topic for today was about teams, forming teams. What do I look for in a team, and how you all get together in a team? And I'd like to make this interactive. So as you in fact, one of the easy things to do is if you have a question, because I'm looking at all of you and everybody's on mute, and I experience this when I'm working with the different project teams, and it's always interesting. So nobody wants to go off mute, but I'm trying to make this relevant for you, for your master's experience. And frankly, in order for you all to understand, well, what's the real world like? I mean, I built teams ever since I graduated from Lehigh back too long ago. So I've always worked with teams for various and sundry reasons in business. I've formed teams. I've been assigned to teams. Teams are an important concept because you don't do anything alone anymore in the world of business, pretty much for the things that you all are interested in doing. I'm sure that there's some individuals who are doing research in a lab somewhere, and they're for the most part working individually. But I don't think that that's really going to apply to most of you in your future careers. So understanding, not only how to be a good member of a team, but how to get on a team. It's interesting, the previous conversation where you all were talking about, how do you network? Well, part of those same networking skills are how you get onto an interesting project, how you get onto an interesting team, how people value you as a team member. So as we're going through this, I want you to interrupt me if I'm not clear on something, or you have something to add, or you have a question. Feel free. This isn't a speech. This is really an outline where I'm going to try to point out some things, to you. So having said all that, in my opinion, and I'm going to use a word that has kind of been heavily used, particularly in the last 2 years. I'm going to use the word diversity, but my term of diversity, and I've been using diversity for a long time, is not the diversity that's been discussed. I have no problem with that kind of diversity, but I want to always think about the diversity of skill sets. I'm not looking at race, color, creed, religion, or any of those things in terms of diversity. What I'm looking at is saying, okay, how do you build a team in such a way that all of the different things that you need to cover from a mission standpoint, in other words, what are we trying to accomplish? You want to make sure that your team has all the different skill sets represented. None of us are great at everything. In fact, few of us are great at many things. Most of us have a set of things that we're really good at. And I always try to recognize that and say, well, this person's really good at these things. This person's really good at these things. And then the magic is looking at that diversity of skill sets, talking about compatibility. How do we get everybody together, working together for a common goal? And so not only am I looking at what are the different diverse skill sets of the different people on the team, but what are the individual compatibilities? Some people are divas. I've worked with a lot of divas in my time. Frankly, they're a pain. So the less you learn to be a diva, and the more you realize that everybody has their own issues with everything, life will work out, very easy for you. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. The other thing I look at, frankly, because even though you might be compatible and even though we have diverse skill sets, the concept of synergy, and it's a really hard thing to discuss in certain ways, because the concept of, does anybody know what synergy is? Typical textbook definition. Anybody? Come on, somebody's got to know something. This can't be participative unless somebody says something. Yes, synergy. What is synergy?
Basically how two people or two things, how well they mesh together or work together. Is that?
Yeah, okay. And that's correct. But
I got one.
It's a little. Go ahead.
Where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, I would say.
Yes, that's exactly right. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. In other words, the whole team, like, so I was laughing about this because I said it backwards not too long ago and somebody was staring at me and I said, well, if you look at each and every part individually, that mounts up to something. But when you add them together and you see that, wow, what I got was exceeding the sum of those parts, that's true synergy. And that's really what you're always trying to build on a team, because otherwise you could just kind of parse the whole thing out, break things up into really small groups and get no inspiration. And that's kind of some of what goes on with synergy. So I look at synergy of talent, I look at synergy of personality, and I look at synergy of mission. So when we're talking about these things, when we're talking about the talents, I'm also looking for people to build their talents based on what other people's talents are, because that's how we develop. I might learn, so actually Matt's on one of my teams. He's actually leading one of my teams. And so he's doing a fantastic job. And I've recognized that, Matt has this infectious ability, to add to the project in such a way that he sees things that I don't see. And he's very fluid with, what his observations are. So for me, it's very synergistic to what our mission is because of the specific talents that Matt has, and he's got an infectious personality. So that's always good. But on top of that, as we look at what is our goal, what's the end mission, where are we trying to get to, there's also synergy in that, where people might begin to see things more clearly as you're going towards them. And so I suggest to you that synergy is important. Another piece that a lot of people today get confused with. I had an advantage of watching a jiu-jitsu competition, and with a bunch of young people. Don't ask me. I wasn't competing. I haven't done anything like that in a long time. But we were talking about not so much winning and losing, but we were talking about the sheer spirit of competition. What did that mean? If you're going to go in and you're going to challenge yourself and measure yourself, it's good to measure yourself. It's good to work on a project. It's good to, frankly, it's good to fail. I mean, it doesn't feel good to fail, but with the experience of success and failure is a very interesting, concept. If you don't know anything and you don't do anything and you never risk anything, then you never get anywhere. So that competition, that putting yourself out there, that working with other people, the nice thing about a team is you don't fail alone. So that's always a good thing. But the other thing that doesn't happen is that you don't fail to move forward. So as a team, you're driven, cooperatively to continue to move forward. And that's an important concept. I think it's one of the most valuable things that your master's program allows you, is to work on projects together in teams. You start getting used to it. And not only do you get used to it, you get good at it, but you get addicted to it, because you start realizing that working with other people, I know you guys were just talking about, for example, networking, working with other people, calling somebody on the phone and saying, hey, I've got a question. I've invited most of the people on my team to call me. And I think at first they're always chuckling and they're reluctant, but little by little, as they text me or they call me, they ask different questions, I can see that they're involved, that they're interested, that I learned something, that they learned something. So we're all in this kind of together, and it becomes this organic growing, thing that we do. So not only with networking, but again, when you're working on a project, you're working on this project together, and hold on, there's an alarm that went off because I'm supposed to be on this call. So the alarm's telling me I'm supposed to be on this call. Pardon for that. So again, it's the concept of competition. It's learning to love competition and not learning to love winning, but it's just learning how to compete. It's learning to overcome obstacles. Competition, I look at it as honing skills like sharpening a knife. The more you compete, the more you work on projects, the more, you have some goal that you're setting and you're accomplishing, the better off it is. It's also very iterative, all right? It allows for improvement, it's experimentation. It allows you to look at situational trial and error. So there's a lot of things that are positive outcomes of not only working on a team, but building teams and building appropriate teams. There's a group dynamic to any team. Think about dialogue. You think about what's a true exchange. We've all sat in meetings where everybody's being terribly polite. I get it all the time because I'm an executive, and people, will just tell me how great, everything that I'm talking about is. And I just laugh at it because to me, that's total bullshit. I mean, not everything I think and not everything I say is a really good idea. In fact, I've actually had team meetings where I'll say something totally absurd just to see if anybody will call me on it. And those are the people that I find valuable, the people that'll go, I call it the emperor's new clothes. It's a very famous fable, but somebody that's going to say, I don't think that's a very good idea. I don't take that stuff personally. And I think true, good, valuable team members, if somebody calls them, challenges them and says, hey, I don't think that's a good idea. My favorite sociology psychograph is a thing, and you can actually Google it. It's very interesting to read. It's long, but it's called A Trip to Abilene. And it's about a bunch of people in West Texas in the middle of a dust storm. And they're trying to decide what to do because they're caught indoors in this dust storm. And so if you ever want to see something that's fascinating that had a very big impact on how I look at group dynamics, again, Google that. So looking at group dynamics, you have dialogue, the ability to talk with one another. You have true exchange where you're actually being truthful. You're not being harmful. You're not trying to be, hurt somebody, but it's like, if there's not a good idea, then don't let it sit. You have cooperation and learning how to work together. That cooperative spirit is very important. Challenge. It's always important to challenge one another. It's important to challenge, the group dynamic. It's important to challenge what we believe are accepted assumptions. And then the interaction. Interaction is always important. And then finally, the critique, understanding that our job is to get better and better and better and better. And so being appropriately critical, not just saying, hey, that was a jackass thing to do, but saying, hey, I don't think we got out of this what we wanted to get out of it. I heard somebody early on talking about working on some coding. And it kind of reminded me, of people that know how to code, but they don't understand what they've just coded. So they didn't keep the end in mind while they're coding. So they're really good at understanding the detail of the language, but the objective was, failed because nobody critiqued the code going through. Nobody critiqued the basic assumptions on the start. And that kind of leads me to my last two major points before we throw this open. Number one is leadership, understanding leadership. Somebody has to lead. But in my opinion, the best leaders have learned how to be great followers. They learn how to support. They learn how to be active in their support. So it doesn't, in the teams that I try to develop, I actually rotate leadership on purpose because I like to make sure that everybody, learns not only how to sit and be a follower, but also understands how to lead because it's not easy. Sometimes it looks easy, but it's like anything else, practice makes perfect. And you'll hear that a little bit later. So leadership and learning how to follow as a result of that leadership are very important, and experiencing both and having empathy for the person that is trying to lead and understanding that this may be the first time that somebody's trying to lead and help them out, cut them a break. So the last part I'm going to say, which is really, really important, is you always want to start anything with a team understanding what the end looks like, with the end in mind, because that's very important, in my opinion, to get the whole team together and saying, hey, what is it that we are trying to do? We are trying to go from point A to point B. Well, if you don't know where point B is, and you don't have a unified view of what point B is and where it is and how it is, then your project isn't going to end up being worth a damn. And after all, it's not just a project, but your life is going to be like a series of projects. You guys were talking about looking for a job. I never looked at anything as looking for a job. I had as a kid, I was fortunate and I had a lot of jobs. And unfortunately, I didn't like most of them. And then I started realizing that, well, my life is not a series of jobs. My life is trying to embark on doing something that I love, and more so looking at it from a career standpoint. It's my life. I want to take active control of it. I like to work with people that I like to work with. I don't like to suffer fools, easily. And I just, I always start with the end in mind. And I have a very, very clear view of what I'd like to do and how I'd like to get it done. With that, I'll also say that practice makes perfect. And the more you practice all of these dynamics and working with teams and other people, the better off we are. So with that, I'm going to throw it open. And if people don't start asking questions, and Professor Zora knows this, I'll start asking you some questions. So shoot, let's have a dialogue.
I'll ask something. Hi, Charles here. How long
Charles.
have you been rolling?
I'm sorry, how long have I been doing what?
Rolling for jiu-jitsu.
Oh, I have not. My son rolls.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah, so we kind of got interested in that because we all started out life fairly early on as wrestlers. So.
Oh yeah. Wrestlers are the best they would destroy me when I used to roll. They come in and just they're nightmares.
So,
so I found jujitsu very interesting, and you talk about a team concept, because that's just to kind of relate this to a team, because I think it's fascinating, because so it's kind of a dichotomy, right? You can't get better at jujitsu by doing it by yourself, right? But it's not like football where everybody's gonna you don't have a pile of people competing with another pile of people on a one-on-one kind of game basis. So it's a very interesting concept of how you work in a team together. And I got a firsthand view of how well their team works together.
Yeah.
It was fast. It was fast. All the things that are going on outside the mat while the two combatants are inside and going after that. I thought that was fascinating. So again, what everybody's idea of a team isn't necessarily a kind of a traditional concept of a team. Sorry.
So
Definitely.
John, I have a question.
Shoot.
Yeah. So you were talking about the relationship as you being an executive and someone speaking out, calling something that this is wrong or this is not a good idea. So as of right now, we have a lot of students here trying to network, potentially with people that's at your level. So when people are approaching you, what do you expect, and what kind of questions are you more willing to answer? What kind of people are you more willing to help out, to make that further connection or to give guidelines, rather than just, this is what I do and that's it? So what is the thing that people at your level is looking for from a student?
It's interesting. So some of it has to do with the introduction. So the context and introduction, and all of the students. In fact, we've worked together, Ramos, and so hopefully I create an environment where people are comfortable talking with me. And so if somebody feels like, hey, I have a question, I can ask John, and that is kind of how I approach everything. I try to be approachable. Now, the context is important. If there's 100 students and I get accosted by 100 students, I'm going to be like most of the average people, and I'm going to be overwhelmed. So as a student, you have to think about, well, hey, how do I pick my moment in time where I'm going to go say something to somebody, and you go up and say, hi, my name is Ramos, and I've got some questions. I'm fascinated by what I understand that you do. Can I take you out for a cup of coffee? If you invite the other person to get outside of where they are whenever you meet them. In the case of Professor Zora, multiple times I've said, if you have somebody that you want to talk and have talk with, I may not necessarily be looking for anybody to employ, but I do know a lot of people, and you get a feel for talking one-on-one with people. And so understanding, like the context of networking. There are networking events, but you meet a million people. I was at one about 3 weeks ago. I hadn't seen this guy in probably 7 years, and he was surprised that I remembered him. But he was memorable. So networking, it's like everything else. You start practicing, right? So what am I looking for? I'm really not looking for anything other than I'm experiencing life, and when somebody interesting approaches me, I just try to engage with them and find out how I can help. When I was young, even younger than you all are right now, one of the things, my father actually owned a diner, and so didn't necessarily. And my undergraduate degree is in chemistry, so I was a science and engineering guy, and really he didn't have a lot of contacts that were science and engineering people. But anytime I needed to know something, he always found a buddy of his that would talk to me. And I learned more from his friends, who he said he didn't know what they even did. And I actually ended up with more job offers because either they said, hey, I happen to know this. Would you be interested in doing that? And I wasn't even looking for jobs at the time. These are summer jobs and everything else. So I think the important part is to look for resources that can give you insights into things that you may not know. Particularly when it comes to what does somebody do in a career. I realized fairly early on that as a chemistry major, I didn't necessarily want to do any of the research that was being conducted at the time. If I was just saying this the other day, if we had what was going on today in biochemistry, and it's really been going on for about the last 7 to 10 years, I probably would have ended up with a PhD in biochemistry and been very active in what's going on today. But that wasn't what was going on back when I was leaving school. So it's always important to understand and contact people and get to know what is it that they do. Not so much I'm putting them on the spot, but what do you do? Like, how do you do what you do? I enjoy most days. I mean, like I'm in this fairly responsible executive positions for pretty much my life, and I got to tell you, less than 10% of the time am I having a totally miserable day. Most of the time, 90-some% of the time, I'm having a great day, and I look around and like watch people succeed, and I love competition, even when I get my ass kicked, frankly. So I just find the whole process enjoyable. And Charles, you're talking about rolling. I think it's kind of like that. You enjoy the activity, and you're less concerned about, well, did I win this one or not win this one? I am building my skills. I start understanding what I'm really trying to do. And I think those kinds of concepts are important, particularly with what you all are doing. You decided that what I learned as undergraduates, was fine, right? I got a lot out of it, but now I want something more. I want to advance my knowledge. I want to advance my skills. I want to advance my opportunities. And that's kind of what your MFE is all about.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Anybody else? I don't know how much time we have left, Professor, but
we only have a few minutes. 11:15. Then we have waiting for the professors to
Yeah, well,
And
you guys
then
can ask me
4:15.
anything even outside of, you can, I mean, if we have a few minutes left and you want to ask me
Sure.
anything outside of Teams, feel free to ask me anything outside of Teams. In fact,
Well,
so I'm going to do a little selling because we're recruiting for not, we've actually got the fall semester set, but we're actually recruiting, people for the spring semester project. So, and Professor Zorro and I are in the process, along with a couple of others, to kind of define what that project's going to be. So, we definitely need all of you to participate, and contribute. And so, hopefully we'll make the projects interesting, and hopefully you'll make the results, fantastic.
yes,
So,
that's the project called, if you go on, it's called ADC project. And if you go on course site, you have a description of what it is. This is really a very pure finance. It's an original project because it's purely finance, but also it's not just a project. It's real, and he's trying to launch something a bit different here. So as opposed to working on other projects, which are basically projects, and you're not going to make something out of it. This could be interesting. If so, you have all the details.
By the way, Professor Zorro and I met through his networking efforts.
Yeah, and you're totally right. I want to give them the impression networking is just for them. No, I mean, networking is how did I get to John? Well, I wanted to create capstone projects. I'm nothing at all, no, not one contact. And so I went to, who did I go to? I think I went to Lehigh, and they said, well, we have all these alum that we know, right? And John wasn't one of the people that I contacted originally. I contacted someone else. And then that person, hey, you may want to talk to John Angleson. I say, who's John? So obviously, when you look at John's project or his background, you're like, well, what do you do exactly? He owns part of a bank, or he's a bank executive, and he has a temp agency, and he has a bunch of other things. So that was interesting for us. So, I see that Paul Brockman has just joined us. So we could move on to the next topic of discussion. John, thank you very much for your help.
You're welcome. And if any of you need anything, contact Professor Zorro, or actually a few other people, and you can ask me anything at any time. It was my pleasure. I'm going to sign off because I've got another meeting to get to and prepare for. So you all take care, and thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. So Paul Brockman just joined us. Paul is a very important. First, Paul Brockman, Professor Brockman is at Lehigh. I think he's in his office right now at Lehigh, and he's a very important person for me because he was very instrumental in my hiring, obviously, but also in the first conference that we put together. I came to him, I said, Paul, I have this idea for this conference. And again, this is all networking, right? So I went to him and he said, well, what are you trying to do? These are some of the topics that I'm thinking of doing. And he suggested to me a few people to talk to. And that's how we got the first conference going. And then the second conference, it was easier. And now we're going to do the third conference in November. So I wanted Professor Brockman to come in because you may have him as a professor in some of your courses. And maybe you could give us a feel as to, what he teaches, but also just as important, what are some of the skills and the background that the student need to succeed in those classes?
Okay, well, thank you for that introduction. Again, as Patrick just mentioned, my name is Paul Brockman. I'm in the Department of Finance. I'm one of the professors in the Department of Finance, but I'm also what's called Senior Associate Dean for Faculty and Research. So I focus quite a bit on research. In terms of my background, I do teach the derivative securities and risk management class that you'll be taking. And my background kind of comes from that area. I worked on the trading desk, a derivative securities trading desk for a number of years in South Florida. Nothing big, mostly just, as we called it, filling paper. It wasn't proprietary trading or anything glamorous. It was mostly just execution. But I do have some feel for, you know, how the markets work, particularly futures and options. That's what we traded exclusively, mostly options on futures. So I got very interested in financial markets, particularly derivative securities from that experience. That was in the 1980s. And at the same time, I was pursuing a CPA in South Florida, and then decided to go on and do my PhD in finance. So I ended up focusing on finance, and particularly on derivative securities. I do corporate finance research as well. And I've worked at a number of universities. I worked in Canada for a few years. I worked in Hong Kong for 7 years. I worked at the University of Missouri, and I've been here for 12 years. This is the longest stint where I've worked anywhere at Lehigh University. I think this is a great program that you've entered. Patrick has done an excellent job putting together this program and mentoring students and trying to put together a very solid curriculum. I think it's a really good curriculum in terms of theory and practice. We always, you know, throw out these buzzwords. We want to focus on theory and practice, but this really is a lot of theory and practice. You'll get, you know, some really hardcore mathematics, the statistics, computer science, industrial engineering, you know, optimization, etc. And then, of course, any and all the finance courses that you'll be interested in. So I think you can go from, you know, derivation of fundamental aspects of derivative securities all the way to, for instance, in my class, doing a project, a very simple project where you simply pick some futures contracts and buy and hold or trade them, you know, for a short period of time, just to get used to marking the market, how that's actually done in what we call the back office. So the front office is typically the trading desk, and then there are people that work in the back office as well. You know, from my experience, especially in Hong Kong, I also would encourage people. I know Patrick also knows this industry quite well and encourages people, but I encourage everyone to think about professional designations. I notice also under Patrick's leadership, we have a lot more certificate programs. I strongly encourage people to go after those certificate programs. You can never have too much on your resume. I was greatly influenced by the competition that I saw over in East Asia. That's well, South Asia and East Asia, so both in China and in Hong Kong, Hong Kong, and India. And so I took the same path myself and doing my CPA, and then later did my CFA, and then did an FRM. And CPA, if you don't have an accounting background, that would be rather difficult to put together. But certainly the CFA, the Chartered Financial Analyst, there's a big component on derivative securities. 3 exams, very challenging, but it's a great line item on your CV. Same way with the FRN, the Financial Risk Manager. This is done by GARP, and I took those exams not that many years ago, actually, just to see what kind of material they have on there. And here's what you'll find for both the FRM and the CFA. It's pretty much what you learn here. Okay, so while you're studying for your classes, you will automatically be preparing for those professional designations as well. I don't know the certificate programs as well. I didn't go through them myself as an undergraduate or graduate in graduate school, but I look at data science and financial analytics, quantitative risk management, and financial operations research. Look, you know, just excellent, absolutely excellent. Tremendous job opportunities out there for these types of skills. And I really, you know, I'll close on this. I really think of it this way. There's a very wide range out there in terms of the skill sets that people want to hire in this area, all the way from if you're really interested in mathematics, Wall Street will hire people with PhDs in mathematics, PhDs in computer science, PhDs in statistics. From that extreme all the way to one of the companies I worked for was a brokerage firm. And these were sales jobs. These were 100%, not my job, but lots of people job. These were 100% sales jobs. These were people skills. Now they needed to understand derivatives because they were selling derivatives. But still, I think it's important to realize, to see up front, wherever you think you are on that spectrum, from kind of pure quantitative skills to pure people skills, there's a job and a career path out there for you. You just need to find where you fall and what you want to focus on for your career paths. Okay, I've probably spoken too long, as is my nature. And for those of you
No,
that
but you know
come
what,
to my class.
Paul, you mentioned one thing which is important, is which I didn't mention to anyone, is this FRM designation, which students should really consider, because you're right, all the classes that you're taking prepare you quite well for that. We also have Professor Konos as well. He's a co-director of the program and is in the math department. Maybe, Daniel, you could give us a feel for the expectations are, and however you want to take it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Patrick, for the introduction. I'm jumping between orientation activities today, so I'm sorry if I was a couple minutes late. Welcome to the Financial Engineering Master's Program, everyone. I'm sure you've heard this a lot yesterday and this morning. It's the first time I see you, but I'm sure I'm going to see a lot more of you in the upcoming weeks in my class. So the mathematics side of the MFE program. So we offer for students, there's two mandatory courses that students have to take. A first course that is a choice between stochastic processes or statistical computing. And Paul described very well the program with this, line between people skills and quantitative skills. And, some of you will fit different places on this line. And that's a little bit the same thing with this course. These courses. So stochastic processes is a relatively theoretical course focused on modeling and using stochastic processes. And I would recommend that if you are on the very quantitative side of the line that Paul described. If you're more on the people skill, maybe statistical computing is more applied, and it's more playing with data and figuring out how to handle it, typically using R in the class to manipulate the data and work with it. From a statistical perspective. So you have the choice between these classes. I think most of you already selected one of those classes, but if you feel after a day or two that you need a change, that's still possible. The second mandatory course is the one that I teach, which is stochastic calculus. And that's focusing on Brownian motion and stochastic differential equations as a tool to develop models for pricing derivative securities and in general modeling financial markets. And no matter which aspect of the program you focus on, more on the very quantitative side, of course, you're going to use this. If you're more on the softer side, you may not use it directly as much as I would present it in class, but it's important to know what is behind those models that you might hear about and you might talk about with colleagues. And it is very important to have an understanding of this. In terms of the exams and the certifications that Paul was mentioning, this is a critical part of it. There's lots of questions focused on this in particular in the risk management certification. So these are the classes. Then we have a lot of options that you can take. Pretty much any graduate level course in mathematics that you would be interested in taking, we can talk about it. So feel free to ask me. If you feel like doing more mathematics, nobody is against it. And we can work that out with you to fit it in your curriculum if you're interested. This is a little bit the structure of the courses we have. Now, in terms of expectations, I know that some of you will probably love those courses because you are deeply interested in mathematics and you like this side of the financial modeling, and you're going to really like those classes. Some of you may be a little bit more scared by those classes, and they are graduate mathematics classes. So you will do a lot of mathematics in these classes with a lot of calculations and computations, as well as simulations on the computer. And it is a graduate level math class. So it is important to be well prepared for those classes, and you have been selected for the master's program. So we believe that you have the necessary background to do well in those classes. But if at any point there is something that you feel like you fall a little bit behind in the mathematics classes, it's important to be in touch with your instructor right away. We have lots of things that we can give you or recommend you as catch-up courses or reading to say, oh, I don't know this technique that you use. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? We can do an office hour. We can do all sorts of different things if you need, there's something that you feel like you didn't know. It's important to not just say, oh, I ignore this. Maybe it's not that important and it won't come again, because you might hear it 4 or 5 times again in the next 2 weeks, and then you're completely lost. And we don't want this to happen. So if there's something that you feel you're not understanding very well, or it's not really your thing, you have to come up and contact us, and we can work this out. It's also a communication between students and faculty that we try to have, and it's important to stay with the program and not fall behind. I think that's the main thing I see with students. There's every year 1 or 2 students who fall a little bit behind, and then it's a lot of catching up to do. Whereas if you ask for help right away, we can go over the material, and then a lot of times after an hour, a student tells me, oh, now I get it. I didn't quite get it in class, but now I get it. So that's a little bit how it happens in these mathematics classes. So you may be, I know a lot of you are maybe a little bit anxious about those mathematics classes, but I don't think there's too much to be afraid of. We have altogether a very high success rate from the MFE students in those classes. The material will be challenging, and will you scratch your head at times? Yes, but that's part of the learning process. And I think those computational and mathematical skills are critical to make you a good financial engineer. Now I'm happy to take any questions if you have. I'm sure Paul as well is happy to take questions. So if you want to know more, if you have anything specific, feel free to ask.
One thing I would like to say, they're a little bit hesitant, but not all of them, I have to say. But one thing that, Daniel, you told me in the past is that, you often ask students if they have any questions at the end of the class or during the class. And most of the time you're not getting, students are a little bit hesitant. And again, if these students have been selected for the program this year, is because I think that they're the kind of students that will come to you and say, I don't understand, I have an issue, because that's that same mentality, right? They need to take that for the projects. They need to take that for the networking. And I know it's a lot of work, a lot of, you have to use different part of your brain, but I think it's important for them to understand that you're always available to answer their questions. You and Paul are ranked pretty high, some of the ranking that we've seen because of your ability to, talk to me. It can't just be you doing you talking and them just listening, right?
Yeah, so I'm always looking for interaction with the students. And I think an exchange between a student and a faculty is important. And, Paul can say a few things on how it goes in the finance classes. It might be naturally more interactive than the math classes. Sometimes the math classes, it's a lot of, professor lecturing at the students, in front of a classroom. And students are hesitant to ask questions and use the resources. One comment I get a lot every year is that students say, oh, talking to the professor in office hours, I learned even more than in class. He answered my question, showed me other examples, and we discussed exactly what it is that I wanted to learn. And I think that's very important. So don't hesitate to come to office hours and ask questions, or come and see me after class and ask your questions, or discuss any aspect of the mathematics and the classes that are going on. And so I think this is very important, because if you stay in your corner, you're going to get a lot of mathematics and equations and formulas and things, and you might say, okay, this is good, I see that. But I think mathematics is not as dry as we can paint it. We can actually talk about it and make connections between different topics and different things. And sometimes, I'm trying to help this as much as I can. And I think students benefit from those conversations a lot. So please be open and feel free to communicate and ask, and don't, I know it's easy to say, but try not to be too shy if you have any questions. If there's something that I'm saying that doesn't make any sense in a class of my colleagues, I'm not teaching all the math classes. So whether it's me or my colleagues, if there's something that seems like foreign language to you, don't hesitate to say it, because maybe we're not communicating it the right way. And that's very important. This last year has been very difficult, because getting this feedback from the students in an online setting is even more difficult. I'm hoping that this year, having more students on campus will help, having more of this exchange and communication, and students working together in groups and all this. That is one of the strengths, I think, of our program, that we have this proximity between students and faculty. As you can see with the size of the Zoom meeting right now, this is not a 200 student program. So we get to know students on an individual basis, and you get to know your classmate on an individual basis. And I think that's very important to make connections and work together. You're not just a number. You are one of the students in financial engineering at Lehigh, and we are hoping to know you through your time with us.
Yeah, I would just reiterate the same things essentially that Daniel just said and that Patrick had started off with. I think it's very important for you to interact with the faculty, and particularly when you have any problems or any questions, or just in terms of, what are your interests? What is your career path? What do you want to do for yourself with this program? I think that's very useful for us to know. Usually in class, I also emphasize just the bottom line, which, from a finance point of view, I make sure I tell students, undergraduate and graduate, we get paid for office hours. So you're not imposing on us. This is part of our job. So whether you feel that the faculty member likes it or doesn't like it, they get paid to do it. I particularly like it. I'm sure Daniel does as well. I know Patrick does. We like when you come to talk with us. And I also say, from a practical point of view, it's extremely important for a couple of reasons. Number one, no matter how good you are as a student, in the end, you will sell yourself to somebody. You will sell your skill set. You will sell what you can do, how you can add value to a company, and being able to articulate that is extremely important. I really think it's a tragedy, and I will say this because in some ways it's the path I took, just focusing on grades as an undergraduate, focusing on what I needed to do in the classroom, and not focusing on what I needed to do to get myself prepared for the job market. And I think interacting with faculty members helps you prepare yourself for the job market. You develop that skill of expressing yourself, of listening to someone, looking them in the eye, and responding to them. Also, from a very practical point of view, a lot of times, some of you will ask us to serve as, to write recommendation letters, or to take, provide, potential employers with some feedback on you. If all that I can do, I'll always say yes. I will always say yes. But if all I can do at the end of the day, when someone contacts me, is say, well, I have their grade here, they did well, I vaguely remember them in class, but I can't tell you any personal story because they never talked to me after class. I mean, I'm not going to say it that way, but that's very clear. That's not a good recommendation. You could be a C student in class, but if I can tell them, your potential employer, how you spoke to me, how you showed initiative, how from what I could tell, you were highly motivated, I think you'd be a great employee. You know, I can speak to you about you as an individual. Only if you come and talk to me, you know, during office hours. So I think it's important to try to develop those relationships. Doesn't mean you have to do that with every faculty member, but if you want letters of recommendation, et cetera, it really is helpful if someone knows you. And again, these are mistakes I made as an undergraduate and as a graduate. But I think it's important to think along those lines.
I have, this is a great segue because I have Tim Oren who's going to be talking a bit. Tim is actually a Lehigh graduate. He's not part of this program, but he works at IMC Global, a very prestigious trading firm in Chicago. What Paul just talked about reflect a lot of what Brian was talking about earlier today, is that, you know, you're coming in this university and you're thinking great, right? That's okay. But what you need, you hear from a professor, is that don't just focus on that. There's, you know, talk to the professors, right? And have this discussion. It's key for you to be able to interact, because I want you from the get-go to be as proactive as possible. If you're seeing you're spending your days besides studying or working on your project and you're not doing anything else, then you should be networking. And if you're not doing that, then you should be going to conferences. And you should be doing always, because this is still a safe area right now, right? You haven't gone out yet. But you need to be as prepared from all these faceted and I make no mistake. I mean, I have no illusion that not everyone is going to hit it on all cylinders. You know, 4.0, great job, understand everything, great project, fantastic interviewer. That's not going to happen. So you're going to be good at certain things and not at others. So we're throwing all these things at you to see what is going to stick. So the more of these things sticks, you know, good grades, good interview, good network, the better you're going to be to get that internship or that job. But as Brian and a few other students said before, right now, you should already be focusing on your internship. And by focusing, I mean almost interviewing, with interesting concept. So no further ado, Tim, why don't you take it from there and tell them what they need to do?
Okay, thank you, Pat, for the introduction. It's always great to be here. I started speaking to this class last year. I think that Brian and some others realized that I was one of the few from Lehigh who's ended up in a front office role in trading, specifically like high frequency trading and market making. The firm I work at is IMC Financial Markets, which is based in the Netherlands, but our largest office actually is here in Chicago. It works out today because I'm work from home. Right now I'm in the office about 3 days a week, but I get Fridays here in my apartment. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about how I made it to IMC and maybe some of the things that you can take from your master's program when it comes to the recruiting process, which depending on where you are in that program, the recruiting process in some cases actually starts August 1st for internships and maybe starts around September 1st for like graduate hires, like full-time employment. So it is a very competitive process and there's a lot to consider, but also with this program, the cool thing is you don't all have to be traders at the end of the day. I think the skill set that you develop can be taken to like pure software and machine learning roles. It can also be taken to other branches of finance. So for me, my journey started in 2012. I enrolled at Lehigh at the undergraduate level and I studied computer science and business. When I was a kid back then, I truly thought that I would go and work for an investment bank in like some type of software role. That was what computer science and business meant to me. And it's not really a matter of like prestige or even money. For me, it was like, if you study computer science and you study business, it makes sense to combine both of those things. And back in 2012, that was before we even had fintech as like a concept. Like that really wasn't something people were talking about. And you didn't really have this proliferation of firms like that, especially in New York now. So for me, it was like, hey, like, let's work at Goldman or something. And as time went on, I started to realize that there was actually this very specialized niche focused, like located in Chicago, of like high frequency trading firms, futures trading firms, combining some of like the old school style of like floor trading that was very popular in Chicago with this new type of like high frequency trading where do the traders really trade, or do they just like kind of watch the numbers and their Greeks during the day, for example. My first experience with this came in like 2014 when I was contacted by a small futures trading firm in Chicago. They reached out to me right on LinkedIn, and it was actually kind of an ambiguous message. It wasn't clear like why me or like what they were doing or how they found me. But at that point I was like, yeah, this is probably it. And the way that they explained it was that it was like a tech startup and an investment bank, except the best parts of each. And I would say that's that you get a lot of like meritocratic, like you are able to grow a lot faster. There's no such thing as like an analyst, an associate, a VP. You can just go in, and by the time you're in your mid 20s, you can really have an extremely high ceiling, but also the problems being solved are very intellectually stimulating, more maybe like a tech startup where like you're doing something, you know who your competitors are, and it's like a competition. It's really fun. So for me, I started actually as a C++ developer in 2015. That was my first internship. I worked on our core trading platform. And that's a really good introduction to the industry because you learn a little bit about what the traders do, but then also what the traders are asking for. So at these firms, you don't have these layers of management. The trader will come directly up to you and say, hey, here's what I need. So some of you might be thinking, oh, I want to be like a quant researcher. At a lot of these firms, the cool part is like you don't have layers of separation. Like you might sit directly on the trading desk, and you might really during the day be able to see how your changes are affecting production or the problems that your changes incurred. It's really cool because these feedback loops are way tighter than any other industry, including finance, including product facing roles, just because you don't have customers in this branch of finance. You just make money or you lose money, and that is the entire basis of your feedback. So from there, I worked basically as a C++ developer for 2 years. Then I moved into more of like a DevOps and reliability role, which that was cool because that brought me closer to the traders and like what they were looking for. But then also I got to experiment with other languages in these parts of finance where like you just can't learn it in school. And that was kind of my experience, was that a lot of people didn't come out of college knowing they wanted to be traders. They kind of found their way into the industry through these like backdoor channels, through like random recruiters who just told a really compelling story. They just sold it really well. After my time there, I moved over to IMC. So I had a little bit of time off for a non-compete. I started at IMC in 2018, and I'm coming up on my 3-year anniversary. IMC has been, I think it's like one of the shining stars of this industry right now. Extremely competitive in nearly every product we trade on multiple exchanges. The desk I'm on, we trade 23 hours a day. And it's just been really cool because I've been able to actually sit directly on the desk, like in what you would call like a front office role, and get in this rare position where like my background is as a software developer, but I have been involved in trading strategy, both from the perspective of maybe where can we get signals from and what are some unique ways that I can provide signals in maybe less mathematical ways than a pure quant, but then also in terms of latency. So as far as saying like, oh, well, this cabling configuration is like 50 nanoseconds faster than this one. And a lot of times we have the data to show like, yeah, we won this race or we lost this race, and why? Because we know theoretically how fast some of these trades or how fast some of these triggers will be responded to. So it's extremely stimulating, sometimes overwhelmingly so, but it's what keeps me going every day. I've really enjoyed it. I've grown with IMC. Our office here in Chicago has almost doubled in size since I started. So we started about maybe 200 something. And I think we're going to hit 500 within this year or early next year. So it's been awesome. And, you know, for anyone in this program, I think that there's a lot of really cool opportunities here in Chicago, which maybe from Lehigh, it's not always obvious. But also I'm here as a resource for you. Any questions that you have as you try to navigate this landscape, I'm there for you. So both what I did at the undergraduate level, I didn't graduate from this program, but I'm happy to answer your questions. And I certainly have a lot of opinions. I'm happy to share them with you.
Any question for Tim?
Hi, Tim. Am I audible?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yep. It's so good to see you. You've made to the other side. It's very inspiring. So we are at a nascent stage in this industry. We're trying to apply for some internships, and obviously IMC is it tops the list, kind of tops the list. So what is it? So initially, I remember having a conversation with Professor Zoro about what is it that sets your resume apart. Everybody has a similar GPAs. Everybody is working on some fantastic capstone projects. Because you've made it to the other side, what is that one suggestion you'd want to share for students applying for internships, jobs, that would, you know, strengthen their case?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because to your point, once a firm has kind of permeated and like you're known as like a top 5 or top 10 firm, everyone's going to apply. So like, how do they even sort through these resumes? I think the good news and why I have a lot of faith in IMC is that they give interviews to a large group of people, because the first few, I would say like interview segments might be automated before you make it to the super day. So IMC is much less of like a black hole where like for the banks, like you'll never hear back from them. Like IMC is going to give you an answer generally, which is really cool. I know even some people might have, who are older, maybe might have applied this year and like you get feedback pretty quickly. But as far as that like differentiating factor, for me, it would actually be like, it's not that you have to be obsessed with this field. It's not that you have to live it and breathe it. But if you are going to have these personal projects, or even if you're going to try to do like startup or like research-based things, it's really helpful to be able to show that like you understand it and that you've had some original ideas or intuition. And I'm not saying that means you like build a trading firm from the ground up, but I have seen undergraduates from Lehigh who have gotten offers from IMC who have built end-to-end like Bitcoin trading things. And not necessarily to say, oh yeah, and we're like, our alpha is this or whatever, just to say that like you understand it and you can go end to end, both as in terms of like back testing it, like, you know, understanding the ideas, having a little bit of software experience too, I think helps a lot. I think at least being able to like pseudocode to work your way through problems algorithmically is a differentiating factor now, where even IMC says like not a hard requirement, but strongly recommended. You can probably imagine why. I think it comes down to those projects because yeah, GPA and stuff. The good news is that you no longer have to go to like Harvard to work at trading firms. My experience has actually been that the firms are kind of eschewing the extremely prestigious schools in favor of like state schools. And I've actually found that there's been a drop off in like maybe Ivy League applicants and a lot more people coming from University of Illinois, Purdue, Michigan. Of course, this is somewhat localized to Chicago, but yeah, I don't think you have to worry about the prestige of school or even that you have like a 3.9 GPA. It really comes down to like personal projects and showing interest, but also keeping it in like a somewhat concise resume. I think it depends on the role you're looking for also. Like IMC, kind of the difference is that for most people applying for our trader roles, most of them do not have master's degrees. And that's because even if you've been around the industry, a lot of the styles of trading don't translate between one firm to another. So having 2 to 3 years of experience somewhere is almost completely meaningless to come to IMC. Maybe some of our competitors, but from the firm I came from to IMC, basically none of my friends followed me who were traders because it's completely different. So a lot of times they are looking at people earlier in their career, but I think a program like this gives you a huge boost because you're finally getting, you're getting there, and it allows you to compete both for trader roles and for like quant researcher roles. And that's really the edge you have.
Hi, team. Thank you for your speak today. I have a really a question about the prospect in the industry, because I've read somewhere a lot of the quant researchers, maybe in the later days, when they will switch out in 3 years or 5 years. Where do you yourself see the ladder up in terms of career paths, or if there's more of a more high percentage of people transferring out using the skills they build up in this industry?
It's really tough, but I will say that in this industry, most of the people who transfer out because they don't care about money anymore. And that's really my position, and kind of what I've seen is that, like, they put in the hard work, and if they're really good, they end up doing things that maybe have more meaning to them or meaning to their views, even on like philanthropy and helping the world. Not to say everyone retires onto a private island in their 30s, you know what I mean? But I've noticed a lot of that where they're like, hey, I put in the hard work, and now maybe I'll do a startup or something. As far as the general, for the layman, I would say, like, the average person who like might come to work in trading, the prospects are excellent. Even though there is consolidation every year, there's like a big blow up or whatever, and it is very competitive. I would say that the as far as like the compensation you can expect, even the work-life balance to an extent compared to banking is very good. The only place I think generally you have an issue in this industry is that where your friends who work in investment banking are getting like the big promotion to like associate and the big promotion after 5 or 6 years to VP, that does not exist in trading. At the largest firms, at the smallest firms, there's really no set promotional track. I mean, I have friends who work at Facebook, and you're like, software engineer 1, software engineer 2, software engineer 3. Even in my role, I've been called the same thing my entire career, which can be kind of uncomfortable in the light of the fact that like everyone here is on LinkedIn, right? Like you see your friends getting those promotions and changing the titles and like moving up, making lateral moves. It's not that you can't make lateral moves. It's just that you don't have these same, it's just not as comparable. It's just not as comparable. And also as far as like being a manager, perhaps, there's so much freedom that sometimes it can be like, I don't know, sometimes I feel a bit of like paralysis. It's like, well, you have to balance between like freedom and autonomy and like respect for someone. But like people who come right out of school within 6 months, some of them are just as productive as I am. That's the truth. So maybe that's what scares people, is that there's always that fire, because people know that they can come and they can challenge your ideas right out of the gate. So yeah, prospects, like I think the industry is great. I had an opportunity to go to well, not really a startup anymore. It's a public company, but they were called Palantir. And that was my decision. I was like, I could have gone to Palantir and got those stock options pre-IPO, or I could have gone to IMC. And frankly, like I've never looked back. I think that the pace in this industry is way better. I think there's still a lot of room for everybody. But I also appreciate the fact that I really paid my dues for 2 years in this like a central like core software role where like I really wasn't as close to trading as I expected I would be. But now here I am on the other side, and it's there. And I think a lot of software people, it depends where you land, but it seems pretty fulfilling. And I think retention at a firm like IMC is actually probably higher than you would expect.
Hey, Tim, can you maybe just talk a little bit about what makes, say, a successful trader as opposed to a successful researcher, and what, like where should we focus? Do you think we should be, or who should focus on what, I guess would be my question, depending on kind of our maybe either backgrounds or coming out of Lehigh.
Yeah, my advice would be that traders historically, or maybe even stereotypically, have a little bit more of a killer instinct, where you're simply you're producing more under pressure consistently, while also generating good ideas. On the quant research side, you're expected to come up with better ideas, deeper ideas, ideas that might be mathematically not feasible for a trader right out of undergraduate, that are maybe more like broadly speaking, where it's not like one product, but it's actually like some like more like derivative. It's something at like a higher level of that. My advice, honestly, would be like, if you think you can handle trading, and again, it's not a bunch of guys like shouting. It's not like these scenes from the movies in the 80s. It's actually quite tame where I am now. Like we don't even have like fill sounds. Like it's actually a very quiet desk. you still see a lot of traders who like have that instinct, who like they are analyzing things while they trade, and they're like, oh hey, like this guy got in here, he got out here, like what happened, like we have to, like what's going on, where you can kind of be doing this competitive analysis intraday, whereas maybe in a quant role you're doing this competitive analysis like using a huge batch of historical data. And I think with each of those roles, your background as a programmer, your ability to do backtesting, I think matters quite a bit, where it's like, it's depending where you get put, but like you want to be able to make sure that like if you are having these ideas and you're consistently having this output, you want to make sure that you can be self-sufficient and autonomous in your thought process, your idea generation, and delivering it, being able to come to someone and say, hey, here's a signal, let's start trading. Or like, hey, here's something we need to do differently. It's like whatever allows you to do it the best. Like think about what you would do if there wasn't a trading firm for you to work at. So if like a group of 5 people, and I know you get together for projects here, it's like if a group of 5 people in this project, in this program got together and said, hey, like how are we going to make money in the market? Think about what you would bring to the table. And that's really what's going on in this industry.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for coming today. I have a question about the hard skill required for the trader. So it didn't come from the CSB or computer science background, but I do have some exposure to it. What, in terms of a technical skill, what are some skills I need to prioritize, and what are some skills that IMC is, looking for the most?
Yeah, I think in our interviews, and there are like, I can't reveal too much because I also don't give this type of interview, but I will say that there are some people online who have written extensively about like what the first few rounds are like and what that is meant to simulate. It's worth mentioning that when you come to a firm like IMC, you go through a very rigorous training program, like once you are full-time, and also like in line with your internship. So like you'll have 3 months of like picking up most of the things you need to pick up in the finance world, perhaps. And then even in like the Python thing, like some people come in and they kind of struggle, but I would say generally speaking, if there's a programming language to focus on, Python. But I definitely am not coming here to say like, oh, everyone has to be like an expert programmer. I totally get it. This is a different path. In my opinion, it's actually a better path because like the skills you learn here they're not easy to learn in the classroom, but they're almost impossible to teach yourself without having someone there accessible to answer your questions and to push you and understand where you're paced at. So I think that's kind of it, but there's a lot of mental math that comes into play and a lot of statistics. And I frankly don't think you could know enough about those things because it comes up all the time. And it's something that will be, you can't fake it, right? Like no matter how much prep you do, you have to be able to do these, kind of like these statistics, this thought process has to exist when someone says, hey, you have this long to figure out if you, I don't know, some of the stuff like the one example I was given back in the day is like, all right, if you have a revolver, which is a gun with like, a chamber with 6 bullets and you have 1 bullet in a chamber and you spin the revolver, like what's the chances that when you click, you're going to fire the bullet? And it's like pretty simple. People are like, all right, well, it's like 100 divided by 6. I don't know. It's like 16 point whatever %. And then you're like, okay, well, like what if you pull the trigger twice? And it's things like that. It's like kind of fun. Like there's a real world application. The thought process people are trying to get you to is like, hey, that's actually something that might be going on the desk. And that's the way we can level the playing field. So we don't want people who have just like prepared for this for the last 3 years. We want people who just like generally like math. They like thinking about it and they're kind of fast on their feet.
Thanks, Tim. Karen, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just a follow-up question. What is like your guess of the percentage of people working there that's coming from a computer science background? Like for your position.
Yeah, so for my position, it's a little bit different. So my title, which I guess I didn't say this, is trading systems engineer. So it's a hybrid. Yeah, so it's a hybrid position where like we do reliability, like what you would actually call like site reliability engineering. And also like some analysis, some whatever, like some of the guys historically have been traders. But one guy on my team literally used to be an IT help desk worker, which is crazy. I mean, I think that's like also speaks to the fact that like IMC really isn't snobbish in that regard. And he's one of the best people I've ever worked with. typically now it's a hard CS background, also with a hardware background, because we do hardware networking, because we have to know a lot in this very convoluted space. Because you guys probably hear like, oh, the cloud, AWS, whatever. All of our servers are co-located at these data centers, and even to find people who can understand like how to troubleshoot and install these things, it's kind of like a lost art. Like a lot of people don't do it anymore because everything's in the cloud. So it's a pretty specialized role. So in my role, it's a lot of like CS, hardware, whatever. And I'm just lucky that I found this niche, which is actually in news and events, like parsing and trading. I think generally for a trader, I would say it's roughly 50%, at least one of their degrees is in CS, but we see a lot of math as well. But I think also at this point, probably if you're coming out of a math program as an undergraduate, you've done some computational stuff, but also we see people like with like traditional economics degrees and stuff. Like, I don't think anyone should feel like they've been counted out, especially now that you're in a program like this. I think you're in a pretty good position.
Hey, Tim, one thing I do know is that, and correct me here, but I understand that whenever someone goes an interview for IMC, you guys like to, you're probably not looking for the smartest or the brightest people, but really the people that can explain, like you said, build this thing from scratch. What can you actually do, and can you translate that intelligence into something practical, and can you explain it, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. Actually, the interview station that I run is literally like, we call it systems design. And that's like, hey, like here's a problem. And it might be something as complicated as how would you build Twitter, for example? And then depending on the person's level of technical expertise, we'll be like, oh, well, like, how would you do this? How would you do that? Like, that's too slow. That's too fast. Like, that doesn't store enough data. When we get to the traders, like, it's the exact same thing. It's like, IMC was built on collaboration between people who happen to be smart, but not that like it was always like the geniuses who came together. There's a lot of like very average, like I would just say very run of the mill, just like friendly, open people who just wanted to push themselves and wanted to push it in this industry, but it happened in collaboration. So it's like, of course, what's the point of interviewing if you could just look at someone's resume and be like, oh, great, you got a 4.0 GPA at Caltech. Okay, but I can tell you that like a lot of those people don't make it to trading firms, because we want people who, first of all, don't have the ego and who are going to grow and empower others. Like, it's not just like the values that we value in individuals. It's what we want as you become like a team manager, like a team player. It's like, how do you fit into the puzzle? And the truth is that sometimes the people who look the smartest on paper just can't handle being around people who are as smart as them, like things like that. Like a lot of things that are almost, you say it's just like, there are right ways to go about it and wrong ways. And I think IMC, the results speak for themselves in relatively short periods of time. So we found a lot of, I think we've had a lot of success in just saying like, come as you are and make sure that like you value collaboration, and just like, we call it like the no asshole rule. And it's basically like when someone comes to the interview, like you have to make sure that they're not going to be arrogant, or they're just not going to have a couple successes and become this like standoffish, like arrogant person. And it's something that plagues a lot of areas of finance. I think when you figure it out in trading, you can have some pretty good results.
Tim, thank you very much for your time. I know that you're busy, so I don't want to monopolize you too much, but again, lots of good advice here. Like what you do, focus on telling a story. You got to work with a bunch of other people, which is not things that you really learn in your curriculum, quite frankly. So you got to learn as we are spending a lot of time together. I've been telling all of them that we're working on like 7 or 8 projects, and I want them to be involved in projects all year long, so so that they're always focusing on telling the story, obviously developing your skills. But this thing that you say about Twitter, for example, is great. How would you build Twitter? What? I thought you were going to ask me about this mathematical thing that I've been ready for 3 years. It's important. So thank you very much for that kind of perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. It's always a pleasure. And for me, the thing is, as much as I know, there are things being done in classrooms, and as new graduates come up, that is interesting to me too. So I'm happy to talk to any of you. offline, one-on-one, more about IMC. Like our interview process is a very level playing field, so I can't give anyone like a +1, but I'd be happy to tell you more about maybe some other firms I recommend. If you're like, hey, like this is kind of weird, like there are some weird ones out there. I'm an open book to you guys, and I would appreciate it. Reach out. I'm busy, but I'll always make the time for someone from Lehigh. I wish you all the best of luck with this school year.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks. I'll drop my email.
Okay. A second. Just copy and paste that. It's important. Especially for those of you that are graduating in May, you do want to get in touch with Tim. Make sure if only Lehigh. Great. Okay. So yes. Now, having said all this, we haven't had that many MFE graduates going to IMC Global. As you could see, it's a very particular skill set. You could see the way he was talking, he was very clear, right? He was explaining a bunch of ideas very quickly, but also he was also smiling a lot. That is something that we're going to need to work on to make sure you come across the right way. Now, of course, and on top of that, he gave you his email. So Karen, Yeren, whoever is graduating in May, don't ask him what's the secret to get hired, but tell them, listen, these are the things that I'm working on. These are the projects. I mean, Karen, you're working on 3 projects. Tell them, I'm working on this, this, and this. So where do you think, is this someone you could recommend? This is networking, show me someone else that I could get to, because everybody gets a job, but I would like you to get quant job this year. Okay. Now, enough of this. We have a treat, and she's the one that's gonna kind of take over from now and do whatever she wants to do with you. But I have Anne-Mette Alvolson. She'll tell you exactly where she's from and what she does, but she's a requirement in 484. I want you, every one of you, especially the new students. The existing student, I think, spoke to you already, but the existing student, I want you to speak to Anne-Mette about all this. Now realize that this is kind of a lot, right? Because you're thinking curriculum, and now this is a third person, including this guy, telling you it's not the grade. So if you came here to be a good student, that's kind of the wrong approach. Not that I want you to be a bad student, but there's something else going on, and unfortunately no one told you about it, and you don't know exactly what it looks like, what it feels like, what to do with it, but it's out there. And the sooner you find this thing, the sooner you'll get that job that you want. So Anne-Mette, please.
Sure thing. Hi, everybody. I'm going to share my screen for a moment here and just guide you through through a few slides, but most importantly, a conversation. And let me say that I want to sort of share some thoughts on a high level, because this is an orientation, if you will. And then we're going to work more one-on-one together on your original and your transformational paths here. So let's see. Sorry. Okay, so my name is Anne-Mette Halverson, and half Danish and half American. That's where the name's a little bit different. So if you have to ask about it when you meet me, that's no problem at all. I want to talk to you today about this very transformational time. And I call your career paths as a transformational journey ahead because it is. And it is a transformational time, both in the industry that you're working in and for yourselves. And I want to talk to you about, sorry. Hang in there. I want to talk to you about why transformation is important and why to think about it like this. Because there are certain circumstances that enable transformation to occur, a real change, if you will. And one of them is having a new network, is being with people who are different from you, who are new to the party, if you will. Typically, we get stuck in our current stories, our current networks, and we can't grow. So simply being in this program is an opportunity to make some changes for yourselves. And it's really very important. I spent maybe 20 years in change management in organizations, and I'll tell you very briefly about my background in a minute, because I want to hear about yours. But during times of transformation, which are very rare in life, it happens very infrequently. It's an opportunity to focus on your strengths and the sort of best self. We don't have a lot of opportunity to reflect and take stock on what are my strengths. And this is the time. So the second thing is, as Patrick has emphasized over and over, and now you're starting to see, is the story, is being able to communicate. Now, Georgette, the College of Business, talks about Lehigh being at the intersection of business and technology. And I also spent maybe 10 years in the tech industry. And I'll tell you that even as technologists and engineers, the importance of communicating what you're doing in a way that applies to the best providing, because you never know who you're talking to, is so important. But more importantly is your story. I think each one of you will communicate your strengths and what you're getting out of this program in terms of the projects you're working on and the moments of sort of, aha, I love this. This is where I'm good. That's enough to tell your story and excite someone else on the other end in a networking conversation. That's all you need, is to show that enthusiasm about what you're learning and why and what projects you're working on. Just simply sharing that enthusiasm is enough for someone on the other end in your business to say, wow, I'm excited about that too. And I want to talk a little bit more about your skill set and why you're thinking the way you are or what you're learning. And so I like what Patrick has said. It's not, my father used to say, it's not how you say it. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. So I think having that, if you feel excited about things that you're learning in this program, and I know you are, don't be afraid to share that with the person on the other end. And I think the other thing that is really important here is the whole concept of networking and the network. And, you know, honestly, I think the term is overused, and I wish we could use another type of term. But I want to say that I'll talk about what networking is in terms of what I think very briefly, and that is that it's simply a set of relationships that we have to navigate. And I'll tell you something else, that typically people in networks, they stay in their own groups. They're clustered, almost like computer networks and system networks. They're clustered and they're connected with weak ties. For example, two professors at Columbia University were really frustrated that people at Columbia weren't networking and getting jobs enough. So they brought all these students from different areas of the university, this is a true story, to a bar. And they watched what happened after 2 hours. And what they saw was the engineers stayed with the engineers, the business people stayed with the business people, the humanities and arts people stayed together, and you can figure out the rest from there. But the only person who really networked was the bartender. And that's what they saw. So the thing about this whole networking thing is we want to sort of reach out beyond where we're at a little bit. And so where you learn a lot, and the network that you have right here in the program now, I think is one of the most important networks you'll have in your life. It's also an opportunity to talk to some other people at Lehigh, perhaps in some other master's programs in the business, maybe some people who are in financial services who are coming at the work in a different way. Because I think that's how we can start to practice our stories. And I'll be happy to work with you on your stories. I can't wait to hear them. And we'll do a little bit of practice shortly. My background, very briefly, I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and I started my career in the tech industry, and I was in it for years. And here was my strength. I was really good at translating technical solutions from engineers to business executives, so they would buy millions of dollars worth of technology solutions. I was very good at encouraging engineers to talk business speak when they were providing their technical solutions. That's the only reason why I studied industry, and I really wasn't excited about selling. So then I changed into the management consulting field because I was more interested in what were the managers doing? What were the leaders doing? How were they motivating people in companies? What was happening between business and technology? How was it playing out? And then I went and I got my MBA. And that was transformational for me, just like this program should be transformational for you. And one of the reasons why it was transformational for me was because I managed myself through it. I took an active role. Our dean in Boston said, if you sit back in this program, it won't be, and just sort of do the curriculum work, it won't be transformational. But if you take an active role and think about managing myself through the program, what can I actively do? What are some of the things I can do a little bit differently? Practicing my story, focusing on my strengths, building my network. And I'll work with you on that as well. That's when we start to make some changes. And so I did. I went into my own business and I worked for Credit Suisse for about 3 years in the back office, risk, legal, finance, and so on and so forth. And here was the issue there. Credit Suisse at the time was merging with First Boston, and the Swiss were coming with new processes, and everything was turned upside down. And so we were helping managers and leaders to focus people on the change. And so that was really a very exciting opportunity to be at Credit Suisse. And I'm sure that some of you have heard of that bank. And then my husband is an executive, a medical device firm, worked for Olympus, and they moved us down here to Bethlehem. And through a friend at a book group, I was introduced into Lehigh. So you see, the reason why I share my background is not to talk about myself, but to tell you that throughout all these years, the transitions were really powerful. And what helps the transitions are two things: being able to talk about what you want for yourself and being able to capitalize on networks. Now, one thing on networks, it's often about weak ties. What I mean by that, just like in the example of the bar with the Columbia professors and all those people you meet on a train who walk in the lobby at Lehigh and you tell them what they're doing and they say, oh, my cousin's a director in IMC. I'd be happy to connect you. Suddenly you're in an interview and you have a job. That's how I got into Credit Suisse. I was at a birthday party with my child and my husband. Woman sat next to me, asked me what I did. I told her. She said, I think the bank needs what you offer. Before you know it, I was interviewing. I had never met her before. I spent 3 years at the bank. It changed my career. So weak ties, the people that we sometimes meet who hear our story, are the ones who bring us into opportunities, not always the ones we know long-term. So one of the things we can do is like diagnose your network. And a network, by the way, should be as small as 20 to start, because it's often about the people they know. So this is an opportunity to help you. In consulting, we always talk about from to. Where does a company want to move from, and where does it want to go to? And so I'd love to take a moment and hear from each one of you. There's an exercise in front of you, kindly, why you chose the program, and kind of state, I chose the program for these reasons, and I'd like to move from this place to this place. And I'll give you an example. You could say, I want to move from an operations role to a financial analyst role in an investment bank. Or currently I'm used to studying this in computer science, and I want to move to more quantitative focus areas in computer science. So if you would be so kind, introduce yourself, say why you chose the program, and think about framing it in the from to. And then we'll talk about what challenges exist in getting you there. Who would like to begin? Let's see. Kieran, do you want to start?
Okay, yeah, I can start.
No worries. Nice and loud.
Yeah. So I guess I'll introduce myself first. My name is Kieran. I am a second year MFE graduate student. The reason I chose this program was honestly, so back in 2020, I just graduated undergrad from Lehigh, and I'm an international student, and this program makes the most sense to me because I'm interested in both business and computer science or technology. I feel like this program is a good in-between. It bridges both fields really well, and it is a STEM program. So it's a bonus for international students. For those of you who don't know, you get 2 years STEM OPT instead of the regular 1 year from business major. And I think it was a very good fit for me.
Excellent.
I think I want to improve myself on technical as well as a financial skill. Maybe I want to work as like a risk management consultant or a quant. I'm not sure yet, but that's what I want to move to. And the challenge I anticipated so far was the biggest one is the math intensity. I wasn't very good at math in undergrad, and I was struggling a little bit in the beginning of the semester. But now, I think after a year, I've been caught up, and I'm fairly competent.
Outstanding. Okay, wonderful. One of the things about expressing ourselves is also, getting comfortable about what to say and what not to say, and how to do it sort of succinctly. And I think you did a great job. So if you were to say in a sentence, so I'd like to move from this to that, how would you describe it? Just one sentence.
Okay, so you basically you want me to compile it and do one sentence.
Sure, just say, I'd like to move from, studying this to studying that, or whatever you're comfortable with, in one sentence.
Okay, I think I want to move from just a purely research role to I'm not sure. I think I want to move from a just purely research role to develop or a business decision maker role in like a working environment.
Excellent. You did a great job. And this is something we can think about in this journey at this time, is what we want to move from and where we'd like to go to. I think it's very helpful to frame, the process. Doesn't have to be perfect. And you can also be in exploring mode. I'm thinking about this. I'm exploring this. So one final point. Weakness is an interesting area, and organizations who focus on weakness don't get very far. And so when you communicate, I want you to communicate on strengths. The other things are called challenges. And so you're coming up on the mathematical area, and that's great. And so we want to focus on strengths. And that's something I'll work with you on as well. You did a wonderful job. The other area I want to point out here is that I want us to learn from each other where we want to go on these journeys, because this is one of the most important networks right here. So invariably, one of you may be interviewing or talking to someone, and you might think, this isn't for me. But from what Kieran described, he might be interested in this opportunity. So we start to create a little networking culture in our own group, and that's not a bad thing. Someone else, how about Charles? Do you want to give?
Sure. I chose the program because of the capstone project, of it being the best way to make up for the lack of internship and industry experience that I have. Because I'm not asking someone for a job, I'm not asking someone for an internship. I'm going to work on a project for someone, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, sorry. Maybe hopefully you thought I was smart and I did good work, and you might want to offer me a job or an internship. With just a regular finance degree with a minor in math, I want to move from a more intermediate level of knowledge to a more advanced level of knowledge. And the challenges I anticipate are getting my foot in the door to start my career.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I like this very much. And also your point about the capstone. I couldn't agree more. I hear a lot of students feeling a bit insecure about not having an internship. And I don't want people to think about it that way, because the internship isn't the only way to skin a cat. The capstone is clearly an opportunity to work with companies. And so I think it's better than an internship. It's what we have. And so I want you to focus on that and be excited about it, because if you are, the person on the other end will be. In other words, if I'm interviewing you from JP Morgan and I say to you, oh, you don't have an internship, you'll respond by saying, actually, I'm really excited to share with you that we have a capstone program and we work directly with companies. So could look like an internship, but I like to think it's more. And here's why. And that's where you can talk about the benefits of this program. What Patrick has created is something that no one else is, not a lot of people are like Patrick. And also we each bring an individual footprint of who we are, and no one else is like us. So think about the assets of this program and how you're interacting with it and why that matters. And that's going to help you get someone else on the other end to say, wow, this is really unique, because it is. And that's part of who you are now. That's part of what will differentiate you. So thank you, Charles. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, who else?
Should I go next?
Oh, yes, please. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chaitari Shinde. Why I chose this program, during my applications, I was fortunate enough to interact with Professor Zoro, and I was able to attend one of the capstone projects with the current Lehigh students, and it was an instant yes. I think, Lehigh was the only place I applied to because of the capstone projects. I'm so thankful and fortunate that I got in, because it would have been a nightmare otherwise. So yes, the industry interaction, the practicality of how things go about with the projects, also the fact that everybody, the kind of efforts that have been going into it. I mean, I know students from India, from across the globe, who have moved to the States with other really renowned universities, but who are still struggling with where they are on their career path, because they're kind of on their own. And it's so good to have professors and the team so invested in you. It's them reaching to us, but it should be the other way around. I hope in the future it's us who will be reaching out more to them. And yes, so I am an economics graduate. I did my graduation in economics. Where do I see myself going? At least in the next 6 months, I hope I am at least marginally able to reach where Brian and Niren have. I've been attending their capstone meetings with Hariom Tatsat, and it's amazing. It's fancy what they've achieved and what they've created for themselves. And I'm intimidated, of course, yes, but I really hope I get there in the next few months. And long term, I really hope that as the program people, if you could help us with the career prospects, because when we got into the program, obviously we know it's quantitative finance and these are the job prospects and all, but we still, at least for me, I'm still kind of clueless about what kind of jobs are there. There's so many of them, and there's so many differences, so if we could have a small session, something around that, because probably, we do know risk management, we do know investment banking, all those things, but that's just really on the surface, right? Really, we don't know what's going underneath. So hopefully, what is a challenge that I think for me, yes, from being an economics graduate, it's a major upskill. The program is a major upskill on so many levels, right from the mathematics to the coding part of it. So everything is kind of a challenge, but I'm sure we as a team would sail through this. Yeah.
Fantastic. I really appreciate. Excellent. I really appreciate you sharing about yourself and your background. And I loved hearing what you like about the program and how you're able to pick out the very special aspects of the program, especially since you're hearing about some of your friends and their experiences. And I think this is, as I said, you're all, without knowing it, starting to tell your stories. And part of your stories are wrapped up in why you chose this program and about its uniqueness and how you're interacting with it and why that's beneficial, not only to you, but to an organization. I agree with you about this self-sufficiency model that seems to be very pervasive in a lot of programs. And this is very unique. It's like a customized program, but as Patrick continues to emphasize the word collaboration, which is really important, and that's the network. People should feel comfortable and safe in this learning environment, and that's occurring. And this is extremely unique. I'll tell you why. I see every single one of you as an emerging leader. And if you treat your people inside an organization, as technical as it may be, like Patrick does, and like some of the professors who are working with you, you're going to have people who thrive, because people thrive when others pay attention to them, put them in positions of strength, and understand who they are. And so you're offering much more than just gaining technical skills here. You're learning leadership skills as well. So thank you. Anybody else here?
Yeah, I guess I can go next. So,
thank you.
Yeah, so my name is Ramos. I was born in China, but I moved to California when I was little. The reason why I chose this program, I guess I was also an undergrad student at Lehigh, and I was working with Professor Zorro since my junior year, and his mentality of networking and also his connection, as well as all the interesting projects that I was doing in my undergrad, made me decide to apply for this program. And I guess from my background, I was coming more of a pure finance guy. I loved trading. I love a lot of the finance stuff, but it comes to a realization that I was lacking a lot of technical skills. So I guess I want to move from a pure finance student into more of an integrated technology, finance, and essentially financial engineering student, and to be a little bit more competitive in the job search and I guess like career development. And the challenge that I anticipate would be getting up to speed to everyone's level in terms of Python coding, and also just to have a little bit more of networking experience. But all I was doing was accounts payable, stapling things, and doing spreadsheets. And I don't think that really benefits me that much.
Thank you so much for sharing your background, and how interesting that you grew up in China.
Yeah, I
Wow,
was there for
fantastic.
12 years.
That's a big part of who you are and a big part of your life. And it's an asset because you've transcended between two cultures in your life. And that's particularly today and what's happening in global markets and global companies, that it's a real asset. Well, each one of you bring assets. I like how you want to move to something more integrated. And I can say that, yes, around more depth, around the financial knowledge. Also, I have to say, in working